Great, thank you, Jonathan. Good evening. This is a special meeting of the Programs and Services Committee for the purpose of holding a public hearing on a group petition that has been filed with the City of Newton. I'm going to read the petition in a moment so that everyone is on the same page about what the public hearing is about. Then what I will say is that folks, please, if you know how to raise your hand electronically, please raise your hand electronically. The rules for tonight are that I will take folks in the order in which they have raised their hand, with the exception of a group of petitioners who I have agreed to let go first, Peter Harrington and a few others, to provide their testimony. Folks' comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. We will have a timer. Jacqueline, if I'm not mistaken, we're able to put that time up on the screen. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so folks should be able to see the 3 minutes. We can try to give a warning as time is rolling down. And then if the 3 minutes hits, I will ask folks to please wrap up their comments so that we can make sure to hear from everybody tonight. Like I said, I'll give everyone 3 minutes. We'll make sure that everyone who wants to speak has spoken. If we get to the end of that and folks feel like there are points that haven't yet been made or they need to speak again, I will open it up again so that folks can speak again. Let me say that at the beginning of the meeting, we have from the Programs and Services Committee from Ward 1, Councilor Maria Greenberg, from Ward 2, President Susan Albright, from Ward 5, Councilor Bill Humphrey. My name is Josh Krensman. I reside in Ward 4, and I'm the chair of the committee.
I'm here.
From Ward 3, Councilor Pam Wright on the committee has joined us. Welcome, Councilor Wright. And I think I saw Councilors Tariq Lucas and Councilor Julia Maliki here as well. So
Councilor Danberg.
Councilor Danberg, thank you for pointing that out. I see Councilor Kelly as well. And Councilor Oliver.
Hiding in the back row.
Welcome, Councilor Oliver. Again, so you should see a little tab down at the bottom that says reactions. Under reactions, you should be able to raise your hand. I believe that's the way it's working, depending on if you have upgraded your Zoom. Raise your hand. I'll, again, call on folks in order, and we will get started. Let me start by reading the petition so that folks know exactly what we're talking about. The question is, shall the Newton City Council cause a non-binding question to be inserted on the ballot in the next municipal election scheduled for November 2023 to obtain a sense of the will of the electorate on the following question? Shall the City of Newton adopt new zoning laws to 1, allow new buildings of 3 1/2 and 4 1/2 stories in our village center business districts? 2, allow the expansion of the lot sizes on which new developments can be built without obtaining a special permit from the current 10,000 square foot threshold to 30,000 square feet. 3, allow the reduction or elimination of parking space requirements in village centers. 4, change Newton ordinances to allow developers to build fewer affordable housing units and allow the affordable units to be occupied by tenants with more income than provided by Newton's ordinances, unless Newton shows its requirements are economically feasible. Again, taking no position on those questions, the wording of those questions, the way in which they've been phrased or anything. We want to hear testimony from you all about whether you think that question should be placed on the ballot. So having said that, let me get started. Mr. Harrington, I know that you wanted to speak, and correct me if I'm wrong. The other people, I believe it is Peter Bruce, Sarah Quigley, and Diane Puente. Do I have that right, Mr. Harrington?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
you do.
Please feel free to unmute. The 4 of you can unmute. So we will give you 3 minutes each, or collectively 12 minutes. I don't know if you are taking turns here. Mr. Harrington, how are you looking to do this?
I plan to speak first. Peter
Okay.
Bruce would speak second. Diane would speak third, and Sarah Quigley would speak fourth.
Okay, great.
And one thing, if I could, before I start, Mr. Chairman, say that the petitioners are not opposed at some point in your discussions and deliberations to agreeing to change of language if that's something that the committee determines would be in the best interest of the citizens of the city.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Good evening. My name is Peter Harrington. I reside at 157 Lowell Avenue in Newtonville, Ward 2. The city council is drafting a new zoning law that will forever change the character of our village centers from New England villages to small urban centers with a heavy concentration of housing. Native to this continent before the invasion by the Europeans was the practice of people participating in the decisions of their leaders. Native to my Celtic ancestors, a people called barbarians by the ancient Greeks, Gauls by Caesar's legionnaires, and a subset of the human race by the British aristocracy, was the practice of people participating in the decisions of their leaders. More importantly, their practice included the opinions of women in the decision-making progress. Infused in my soul is the concept that voters should have the opportunity to share their opinion on any major government decisions. We are here to ask you to provide the voters of Newton with such an opportunity. I know that you have been threatened by the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, with prosecution if you do not enact new laws to add 8 or 10,000 new housing units in Newton. I know the Boston Globe has tried to intimidate you with accusations of NIMBYism. I read the Globe's opinion that Newton has too much green space in its recommendation that we turn our village into cement urban areas. I know that Governors Baker and Healy, the mayor, the Newton Planning and Development Department have a theory that adding all this new housing will drive down the value of Newton housing. If they are correct, don't you think the voters should give you their opinion on adopting such a plan for Newton? My opinion is that the Commonwealth does not have the authority to order cities and towns to build new housing to support a failing transportation system. A system with 2 stations that have been in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act for 30 years. 2 stations that the city councilors have called transit-oriented stations. Nor do I believe the Commonwealth has the authority to threaten to continue to leave the stations in disrepair if we don't adopt a plan to add 8 or 10,000 new housing units. I believe the right thing to do is to allow the voters to express their opinion, then you can do as you will. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Who is next?
Peter Bruce, am I
Okay.
on?
Go ahead, Mr. Bruce.
Can you hear me?
I can, yep.
Okay, as a former political science or a public policy professor, I know it's crucial to examine preconceptions, the paradigms and assumptions behind policies to assess how well they will work. Developers and top Newton politicians tout Jenny Schuetz as a guru and use her book, Fixer Upper, to justify radically increasing our housing stock, but her book is weak on evidence. For instance, she claims, and I quote, "What we've seen from some of the recent academic literature is that where you get big new construction projects, that actually helps keep the rents down." But she cites only 2 articles as evidence. One examined a dozen cities in which buildings in low-income areas, which were burnt down and replaced with new housing complexes of 50 or more units, led to a drop of 5 to 7% in area rents. How much good would it do to reduce rents by that much here when they've been going up twice that fast? And would it be worth the sacrifice of naturally affordable housing, open and green space? The other study found that radically increasing housing stock reduced rents in San Francisco, but ignored that most Bay Area residents these days want to move out, according to polls. And in San Francisco, 60,000 people, 7% of the population, have moved since 2019, suppressing demand and confounding the author's hypothesis. Contrary to Schuetz's argument, 5 years ago, scholars at the London School of Economics did a meta-study of 100 articles and found that densifying wealthy North American and European cities drove up neighborhood rents. And we see that rents in Newtonville's large new complexes, 28 Austin Street and Trio, also contradict Ms. Schuetz. Since they've been open for years, they serve as critical case studies showing how later developments could unroll in Newtonville and other villages with VC3 and VC2 zones. Last fall, if you have the screenshot, I noted prices, median prices for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in these complexes were on average, or the median prices were $3,200 for 1 bedrooms and $5,100 a month for $5,100 a month for 2 bedrooms. Much more expensive than our naturally affordable housing, 70% more for 1 bedrooms and almost twice as much for 2 bedrooms. Today's prices are similar to those that I listed for last fall. The 1 bedrooms are affordable to households making $140,000 a year, but the two bedrooms take more than $215,000 a year to afford. So Newtonville's average or its median income is $140,000 versus that $215,000 that you need. And in conclusion, given the esteem that our leaders give to Schutz's flawed trickle-down theory, as suggested most recently by their willingness to go beyond the MBTA's 8,330 unit total rezoning requirement up to 10,000 units, I worry that they're misleading us into a whirlpool of overdevelopment and gentrification. Please adopt this ballot measure and let the voters have a say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Is Diane Parenti supposed to be next? I'm not seeing her.
Yes. I should
Oh,
be.
great, you're there. Okay,
Can
go
you
ahead,
see
please.
me?
I can, yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Diane Cruenti, and I reside at 305 Winchester Street, and I'm speaking on behalf of Right Size Newton. For the last few years, Newton has been in the process of changing our village center zoning code. Recently, the state has passed the MBTA Communities Act, which requires Newton, wait, I just lost my screen, sorry, which requires Newton to zone for 8,330 new housing units. We now have 2 conflicting, separate but related sets of proposed zoning changes. These changes will affect the look and livability of our village centers and the entire city. When we say that the proposed village center zoning allows for 3.5 and 4.5 stories, the half story will be an additional story that is set back a few feet, as in the 28 Austin Street building. We should not forget that part of the proposed village center zoning will also allow developers to ask for a special permit to construct up to 2 more stories. All of this together is a tidal wave of change for Newton. Furthermore, since the pandemic, many of our shopping and work patterns have changed. Many people use delivery services to have meals delivered to them rather than going out to restaurants. Many use delivery services for grocery delivery. Many of us bank electronically. Many of us work from home or go to work less than 5 days a week. What impact does and will this have on the future need for office space in Boston and the need for increased commercial and residential space on Newton? Unfortunately, we'll still need cars, since public transportation to get around the various neighborhoods of Newton is lacking or non-existent. How will our plans and responsibilities regarding climate change be impacted by such a drastic increase in the built area of Newton? How many trees will be cut down? How much more rain runoff will drain into the Charles River? What about the heat islands that we're going to be creating? We can't ignore climate change anymore. We need to have a plan to increase housing in Newton that does not make climate change worse. Right Size Newton strives for the right size of development that is well thought out. We ask, what is the correct size for development and how do we achieve it? Until we can figure out the problems that these issues raise, maybe we need to take a pause in rezoning for our village centers. All of the proposed rezoning is too big of a change not to allow Newton voters their voice and to voice their say. Thank you.
Thank you. Right on time, even though you lost your place. So good work.
Thank you.
Sarah Quigley?
Hi, I'm Sarah Quigley, 105 Atwood Ave in Newtonville. I support the non-binding ballot question asking voters if the city should adopt new zoning laws since it will offer an opportunity for voters to become aware of the dramatic changes the city is proposing, which would allow 10,000 new units with village center zoning, redesign, and 8,300 new units with the MBTA Communities Act. Most Newton residents are busy with the demands of their own lives and do not have time to become informed and stay current on all the complexities of the zoning, redesign, and MBTA Communities Act proposals. In fact, many residents are not aware of the proposals at all. Including the non-binding question on the November ballot would make the time between now and the November election an opportunity for voters to be able to learn more about the proposals and to know that they will have an opportunity to voice their opinion about the plans when they vote on the measure. The city's community outreach about zoning redesign and the MBTA Communities Act proposals have been insufficient. The city should make it a priority to provide an overview of the rezoning proposals and links to further information online about with all property owners' tax bills and or water bills, so that every property owner would receive information about this before the city council votes on them. Since Newton is a built-out city, rezoning vast swaths of the city for significantly greater height and density will incentivize and accelerate tear downs and redevelopment of entire neighborhoods and sections of the city. Newton's historic neighborhood fabric would be jeopardized by the rezoning proposals, since developers will seek to maximize profit by destroying existing structures and replacing them with larger scale structures. And in that process, we'll lose a lot of the unique architecture in Newton. The proposals emphasize density over the importance of retaining open space requirements, which is not consistent with Newton's emphasis on other environmental objectives. A June 5th article about Newton's rezoning proposals in the Boston Globe was a valuable way of informing readers about Newton's zoning proposals. However, the title indicating that Newton aims to make its villages just a little taller, minimize the significance of the changes, and are in conflict with the village scale most residents prefer. One of the most informative parts of the article was the comments section, in which many residents discussed their disapproval with the rezoning proposals. I encourage you to approve the ballot question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quigley. I see a bunch of hands up. Excellent. Let me take this break to say two things. One, I forgot to mention that we are being audio and video recorded, so take note of that. Second thing, if you've joined late, please raise your hand. I'm taking testimony in the order in which the hands are raised. If you don't know how, it's at the bottom of the screen under the reactions tab, depending on the version of Zoom that you have, but under the reactions tab, you should see a prompt to raise hand. I also want to mention that Councillor Holly Ryan has joined us. If others have joined and I haven't seen them, councillors, please let me know. The next hand that I saw was Carolyn Gabay. Ms. Gabay?
Thank you very much. Quibble, I reside at Doris Circle in Newtonville. Quibble as one may with the specific wording of the petition. The proposition that it stands for basically is that the city council, before it makes the most momentous change in the future of this city, in its history, far exceeding the impact of the general override and far exceeding the impact of a revision to the city charter, ought to receive more input and more impressions from the city's residents than they have so far. The outreach efforts reached a very, very limited number of people and were not conducted with any scientific rigor. The polis and the feedback tools were at best non-scientific. Further criticisms could be raised about each of them. It would be hubristic for city councilors, a handful of 12 people, maybe 13, to decide the future of the city for every single resident here without effective input from the residents and giving them the opportunity to voice their opinions in an informed manner. There has been no mail out to the general residents, as Ms. Quigley mentioned, which would have been quite simple to do. And this is a place that people have elected to move to because the city bears a certain ethos and characteristic and values green space, all of which are being undercut by the proposals. Most residents are frankly, abjectly unaware of what is proposed for the future of the place where they have invested the lion's share of their nest egg to come here to live, to contribute to the welfare of communities, and to educate their children, and to try to live here and age in place. I suggest that it is only appropriate that the residents be given the opportunity to voice their opinion in an organized way, because people do not have the boundless energy and limitless time to follow the inside baseball that has been the nature of the development of the proposals for upzoning the city's village centers. Thank you very much.
And kudos to you for using the word hubristic so smoothly in your testimony. Impressive. And to the people who have already testified, thank you for mentioning your address. I should have mentioned at the beginning that we do like folks to say their name and their address so that we have a record of it. I will also quickly say that if I mispronounce your name, I sincerely apologize. Please feel free to correct me and I will try to do better. Next person I have is Tom Gagan.
Thank you. Tom Gagan, 32 Fern Street. As anyone who has taken a look at the issue knows, proposals for major zoning changes are extremely complex. The planning department has done an impressive job in reaching out to Newton residents, educating the intricacies of the issue, and seeking out their opinions. Residents will have another opportunity to present their views on June 26th. And councilors on the Zoning and Planning Committee have worked hard to educate themselves on the issue in preparation for making a decision on new zoning. All this work, which has taken several years, should not be reduced to 4 paragraphs to be presented to voters in November. This question should not be on the ballot. So I hope this committee would vote no action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gagan. Next person I have is Raina Getz.
Shit. Oops, sorry. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Ms. Getz, I want you to know
Oh, yeah.
that all language is acceptable.
Okay.
We have a Supreme Judicial Court opinion that says that I cannot even chastise you for swearing, so please.
Oh, well, no.
Feel free to speak.
I muted myself and then I, zinged and zanged. All right. So I'm here now. Yay.
Go for it.
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a difficult situation, as I would like to believe that those that are elected to the city council take their responsibility to inform and educate their constituency as paramount. I would also hope that there is a belief structure within the city of Newton that includes that we live in a representational democracy, that when one is elected to public office, one is to take into consideration the opinions of the people that elected them to office. Now, we all know that compliance with the MBTA Communities Act is a state mandate that requires our Newton community to upzone lots within half mile of transit hubs to provide the zoning capacity for multifamily housing at an aggregate gross density of 15 housing units per acre. Where and at what density this is to occur would have benefited greatly with real and robust community engagement. I know this, as I have watched the zoning plan evolve with little consideration to what is the existing context in our built-out community and the identified consideration that all village centers were to be considered heritage landscapes. Now, some of the upzone parcels have either deed restrictions or preservation restrictions in place and or have historic designations that merit being respected and valued for what they are, historic resource assets for future generations of Newtonians. It is a real tragedy that this lens was not applied. And what is more of note is that our neighbors to the east in Brookline are laying out their zoning correctly. They have cataloged their built environment where the zoning is to be enacted, and they are actively soliciting the opinions of parcel owners and residents in abutting neighborhoods. This is occurring now before they formulate their zoning. They are a model to emulate. Lastly, I commend Peter Harrington for this attempt at community outreach. I would have hoped that our city government and our elected representatives would have been the ones to put forward a non-binding advisory question on the ballot, which is with the intentional goal of soliciting the opinion of Newton residents. Why did this not occur? Peter is to be appreciated and one to be lauded for his efforts and his dogged commitment to our city. He's a true statesman. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Ms. Getz. I will quickly mention that we've been joined by Councilor Rick Lipoff. Next person I have is Nancy Zollers. And let me also commend everyone so far on being able to put their hand down after they were done speaking and staying really within the time limits. Very much appreciated. It helps us get through everyone who wants to speak. Ms. Zollers.
Thanks very much. I'm Nancy Zollers, 154 Oliver Road. The is inappropriate on its face.
Are other folks having trouble hearing, or is it on my end? I'm seeing some nods. Ms. Zollers, I don't know if your connection is difficult. If it is, you can try turning off your video. We may be able to hear you better. I prefer when folks have their video on, by the way, testifying, but if it's going to help the connection, feel free to turn it off. Let's try that. Go ahead.
Okay, is this better?
It is a little better. Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you very much. The call for citizen input is ironic given how much the city, the councilors, the planning department has encouraged participation in this process, especially over the last year, but really for the last 2 years. The community engagement was deep, it was rich, it tapped into groups that had never been asked before what they wanted for Newton. The participation of people was many. There were many meetings. Beyond Community Engagement 1 and Community Engagement 2, there have been access to zoning and planning meetings. There have been village meetings. There have been counselor meetings. There's chances to write letters to counselors. We always get responses. There's been so many ways in which the citizens have been allowed and encouraged to participate in this process. Unlike the last speaker, I disagree that the council has not allowed our participation, in fact, welcomed it. Every counselor has, my own and others that are on zoning and planning, that have asked for our input. We have had chances to impact design. We have had chances to respond to the debates. We've had chances to respond to the consultants. Voters have had a say, and the opportunities to do so have abound. And the counselors have taken the responsibility of citizen participation seriously, and I appreciate that very much. And therefore, this petition is not necessary in order to gain citizen confidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to quickly mention that we were also joined by Councilor Deb Crossley about 15, 20 minutes ago, and I forgot to call her out, so I apologize, Councilor Crossley. The next person I have testifying is Margaret Ward. Ms. Ward,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Margaret Ward and I live at 957 Washington Street. I feel that I need to remind some of our city leaders of Newton about zoning and its purpose. Zoning is a contract between a local government and its taxpayers, and it's not something to be taken lightly. It exists so that when people are looking to buy a home in a city or town, which for most people is the biggest investment of their lifetime, that there are assurances. They should be able to look to the current zoning and have a reasonable expectation of what an area, village, or city will look like in 10, 20, or 30 years from now. Breaches in this contract should be rare and only for a compelling need. However, in the last 7 years, we've seen abuses of special permit requests by developers and the inability of city councilors to say no to them, resulting in massive out-of-scale developments. One can't help but to ask, how do our villages truly benefit from these large developments? What was the compelling need to rezone for these projects? And I'm still trying to figure out how the village of West Newton is currently benefiting from that vacant lot at Dunstan East. Zoning is how local government regulates and develops land within its control. And so I ask you, where's the city's control in this rezoning proposal if it is codifying parcels of land in our village centers for by right development? So no review, no questions asked, no negotiations, and without seeking local authority to impose impact fees like our savvy neighbors did in Watertown, this rezoning will turn Newton into a real estate candy shop for developers. I've been living in Newtonville since 1991. After renting for 22 years, I finally took the plunge and bought property in 2013. When I purchased my condo, I bought into a village, not an urban center, and I expected the landscape to remain as such. We residents rely on you city leaders to look out for our best interests and to protect our quality of life. And now you're turning your back on this obligation, recklessly modifying our zoning in ways that will forever change our villages. There is a national narrative being led by a housing advocate, Jenny Schutz, which I find disturbing, especially since it was introduced to me by a prominent city councilor. Ms. Schutz calls upon city leaders to ignore opponents to upzoning, saying that our views are not representative. Her attitude is anti-democratic. Also, how can Newton claim that the public is even aware of these proposals since there's been no official citywide notice to the residents? Therefore, it's imperative that you support this ballot measure so that all residents can have a voice on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ward. The next person I have on my list is Doris Ann Sweet. And I think that Ms. Sweet stepped away from her computer right before it was her turn. And you may hear that I'm speaking a little slowly because I'm thinking that maybe she's going to come back to her computer screen. But that doesn't seem to be happening. Oh, I believe it has. Doris Ann Sweet, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I am concerned about the language of this proposal, which doesn't really reflect, in my opinion, what the proposal of the planning department is, and the planning department thinks it does not reflect that proposal either. So I'm concerned that it's a vote on something that's not accurate. And I'm not sure how that's going to move us ahead at all in this process of rezoning the city for the purposes that have been stated. So I would vote no. I would like to see a no action necessary vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person I have is Jay Walter. Mr. Walter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Jay Walter, 83 Pembroke Street. This proposal, as written, grossly simplifies years of work by planning, by ZAP, and indeed many of the residents of Newton. It boils down all that work and years of debate into 4 quantifiable questions without nuance. It asks the public for an up and down vote without any reference to context, without without any a reference to the city goals. Arguments about this referendum as being giving voice to the public who has not had the opportunity in the process so far is quite simply nonsense. People who want to be involved can certainly be involved. The city has run untold public hearings, public sessions, and there's no reason for people not to be heard. And I don't believe that this referendum will further public education on this issue because the questions are so simplistic. I urge the council to vote against consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Let me mention again for folks who haven't heard, if you're interested in speaking, please raise your virtual hand. Do so by clicking on reactions down at the bottom of your Zoom screen and the raise hand function. And I will take folks in the order in which they raise their hand for 3 minutes each until everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Next on my list is Lynn Weisberg.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Good. Just by the way, at least on my computer screen, all I see is the timer. I don't see the usual Zoom Hollywood Squares graphic. But in any event, thank you, Chairman Krinsman. As Mr. Walter just said, this has been a multi-year process with many opportunities for the public to voice their views. In fact, the Zoning and Planning Committee will have the first of what clearly will be several public hearings on the proposal that is before the committee. The first date is June 26th. Everybody who signed that petition could attend that public hearing and explain what they think of the zoning proposal and the MBTA community's proposal. As Mr. Walter pointed out, each of the 4 points in this petition are topics that have been discussed by zoning and planning, but they do not represent the reasons, or they don't represent any decisions made, any votes taken, and it therefore really makes no sense to put a question on the ballot that is not tied to decisions made by the Zoning and Planning Committee. So for those reasons, and I would join in comments made by others like Nancy Zollers earlier, I ask the committee to vote that no action is necessary on this petition because there will be more than enough opportunity for the public to weigh in on the zoning proposals. I forgot to give my address. It's 5 Alden Street. And just on the technical matter, since I have over a minute left, are we supposed to be able to see the Zoom or are we supposed to only see the timer?
So you should be able to alter the presentation on your own screen. Usually, if you hover over where you might be seeing my face right now, up towards the top, you can probably select the thing that looks like little squares and get more.
I explored those options, but I guess it's a reflection of my weak tech skills. Thank you.
Okay, you may also want to look for something that says switch to shared content, switch or something like that. That may be helpful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ms. Weisberg. The next person I have on my list is Laurel Farnsworth.
Hi, my name is Laurel Farnsworth. I've lived at 73 Perkins Street since 1991. I am very concerned, as several people have already said, that this petition very much simplifies the very complicated process we're involved in. I have not attended every meeting, but I have over this last several years gone to several meetings about zoning and have tried to be educated about it. I think that we elected our counselors to represent us and to learn more than I have the time to do. And I respect our council's judgment. So I really do not think that putting a very simplistic 4 paragraphs out to voters in this coming election does us any service. There have been plenty of times when we could go to a meeting. We could certainly call our counselors and talk to them and express our votes in that respect. I hope that you will disregard this petition and encourage everybody to come to these meetings, despite the fact that it takes time and energy if people want to learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farnsworth. The next hand I saw was Robbie P.
Yeah, I'm here.
Please go ahead.
My name is Ravi Papu. I'm a resident of 38 Woburn Street. The previous speaker's point about time and energy is what I'm going to amplify on a little bit here. So it's not just the time and energy that's required to go to these meetings. What a lot of people don't realize is the time and energy it takes after the construction of these units starts. And we've always had new ballot measures when we change our tax rates or do overrides. And I suggest that the creation of thousands of new units across Newton, which is largely distributed across village centers, is effectively a disproportionate tax on the residents of those centers. As a neighborhood that's been fairly significantly impacted by a much smaller construction project in Newton Corner, let me give you some examples. Even if everything went perfectly smoothly, which it never does, construction liaison committees take time. They take a lot of time for the neighborhood and the abutters. The city doesn't have an effective enforcement system for special permit violations. We have discovered that. So it's left to the abutters to spend time and make sure the responsibilities outlined in the special permit, those conditions are taken seriously. And I think our neighborhood spent hundreds, if not more hours to participate in this process. So that's free work that's coming from our lives. I think that's a tax. But things don't go smoothly. There's always problems, can lead to even more time spent. There are significant problems with construction vibrations and rodents, which will occur. We can't wish this away. These are facts and it's a reality. So just imagining that magically these 8,700 units will occur in this city with no one spending any time or encountering any issues is just wishful thinking. Without good enforcement, the cost of dealing with construction vibrations and rodents becomes, in quotes, and this is a quote from a city official, a private legal matter. And the cost of that is then transferred to ordinary citizens. This is also a hidden tax. And finally, other people have mentioned this, the financial impact of these units on schools and other city services has not been quantified down the road. And those will eventually become real taxes. So there's both intangible and, at least in my humble opinion, tangible taxes that have been that are built into this program. And I don't think in all of these large numbers of city meetings and outreach, the city has provided this kind of context to its citizens because it's just not in their interest to do so. So I support the ballot measure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Papu. The next name I have, and again, if I mispronounce your name, please correct me and I apologize. Next person I have is Lisa Monahan.
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Lisa Monahan. I live at 1105 Walnut Street, and I've been a citizen of Newton since 1991. And I want to commend the City Council and the Planning Department for their long and hard work on this process over a number of years. The community outreach has been incredible and unprecedented in the city. And there really isn't much like it in other cities. I've found that the planning staff and city councilors have been really open and inviting, creating an inclusive process. I don't know how many things related to city government get delivered to one's front door. I think that the city's been very open to any attendance and participation by citizens. And like others have said, I think this ballot proposal minimizes the work that's been done and the work that's being contemplated by this state through the MBTA Communities Act. Allowing taller buildings in village centers, 3.5 and 4.5 stories, is really good for people and walkable cities and community living. Reducing parking is vital for keeping housing costs down. It's good for climate change. There are so many good things about this movement, and I would encourage the committee to vote no action necessary on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Monahan. I want to mention that we've been joined by Councilor Lenny Gentile and also Councilor Lyle Baker, who is a member of the Programs and Services Committee. The next name I have on my list is Howard Rosenoff. Mr. Rosenoff? Mr. Rosenoff, I think you're still on mute.
Howard Rosenoff, 9 Vincent Street. I speak in favor of the non-binding ballot question. The proposed zoning redesign for the village centers will enable foundational changes for the affected areas. Even if those areas encompass only 3% of Newton's land area, as has been claimed, the proposed redesign will affect far more than 3% of Newton's population. And the redesign process won't end with the village centers. Several years ago, the council looked at rezoning the residential parts of the city, but then dropped that effort in favor of rezoning the village centers. There is little doubt that residential zoning will be revisited with the intent of further changing the physical characteristics of the city, or at least certain parts of it. As a non-binding referendum, it won't have the power to affect the rezoning effort, but it will, or at least should, prompt interest among residents, a majority of whom, as far as I can tell, still have little knowledge of the rezoning process. For several years now, I've been watching a succession of proposals to rezone the city, starting with the Washington Street Vision Plan about 6 years ago. Lack of public awareness of these efforts has been a constant, resulting in the city conducting a number of outreach efforts, such as the display in a conference room at the library. Given this history, I was disappointed that the planning department is expressing its opposition to the ballot question, but I note that its objections are largely technical, having to do with the way the ballot question is worded. I'm not a lawyer, but since the question will be non-binding, it seems to me that any legal issues with the wording of the petition should not be material. It seems to me further that the value of the petition in encouraging discussion around zoning, which the city administration says it wants, will far outweigh any problems with imprecise drafting. It is regrettable that changes to the zoning proposal, potentially allowing up to 7 stories in height, have rendered the proposed ballot measure inaccurate. However, in my opinion, the benefit of using even an imperfect non-binding ballot measure to help promote a discussion of the zoning proposal far outweighs any possible downside. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next name I have is Marcella Burke.
Hi, I'm Kevin Burke, Marcella's husband. She's standing beside me. We live at 255 Adams Street. And again, some of the information that I've been listening to and how informed everyone is, it seems like, granted, we're both very busy. We have a couple of young children. We both work full time. We're not usually informed. I didn't find out about this meeting until yesterday. So our concerns were happening, but before we knew about the, how high some of the buildings can go. And as we live now, like some of the other people have said, we've invested, most, all the money that we had to take our children to live in Newton. And the reason we chose these neighborhoods because of the way they were when we got here, realize there's always going to be some change, but when people plan their future, they plan it accordingly, like we did. But we like the way the neighborhood was. And we are never informed. We never got anything in the mail. Anytime anything's being built, we never have any information. And it never seems like, even with the information that we do achieve sometime, it doesn't compare to the buildings that are being built. They never come out the way they say they're gonna. They're never the size that they say they're gonna. And at the end of our street at Craft Street, we live on the corner of Adams and
255
and
Adams
Lincoln.
Street.
Adams and Lincoln. And they're going to add another 209 units at the end of our street at Craft Street. And one of the previous speakers were talking how that somehow she thinks that this is going to lower admissions. When you're adding like this many units and this many people, that there's absolutely no way. We're already struggling to get places on time with all, anytime they take down a unit, they add at least 2 more units. So the traffic in our neighborhood is already extremely difficult. So, I mean, I think like the least we can do is given the opportunity to vote on things, even though at times we're extremely frustrated because it doesn't seem like that we have anything we say has any effect, that these buildings are constantly being built. And because we haven't stood stronger now, like when something like this happens, they plan on just building bigger and bigger, and it's not going to be a neighborhood anymore. It's going to be an urban center, and it's like there's going to be too many people in the same place. And a lot of the people that that I've been listening to have lived here for a really long time and probably had a plan in place. And it's going to be changed now, like ours is, because there's so many people in our neighborhood already. And when you're adding these so many units, I just don't know if there's enough space. And like I say, we're in favor of this vote because we want to at least participate in what's going on, and we want to be more informed. Thank you. I know I'm going over time. I apologize. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Burke. Appreciate the testimony. Next name I have is Stephen Farrell. Mr. Farrell, I don't know if you're on mute or if the sound isn't working. I'm not seeing the mute icon in your box, but I don't know if the sound on your computer is not working. We can't hear you. Still not hearing you.
Hello?
Oh, yep, got you now. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I don't know what I clicked incorrectly, but good evening and thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Stephen Farrell and I live at 30 Winston Road. I'm going to begin with a perfectly timed 2-minute and 59-second presentation, but I don't know how far I'll get before I start to change. I believe that tonight's question before Programs and Services Committee is starkly simple. Should 13 people, a simple majority of the city council, just 13 people, decide what the entire city of Newton will look like for the next 50 to 100 years? Or should this committee recommend that a majority of Newton's nearly 60,000 registered voters be allowed to give their opinion on this plan? It's generally true that city councils are elected by residents to act as our representatives in most instances. At times, however, an issue is of such scale and importance that the council recognizes that it has an obligation, legally, ethically, or just plain commonsensically, to say to neighbors, residents, taxpayers, and voters, hey, this is a very big deal. We would honestly like to know what you think. Please read the plan over the next few weeks. And by that, I'm changing to say not just 4 paragraphs, but a plan. Over the next 4 weeks, call us with your questions and then give us the upcoming on November 7th. We've all seen and participated in such referenda over the years, including on March 13th. May I suggest that if you're truly acting in the best interest of the city and its residents, it is my understanding that you, this committee, actually have the power to call for a referendum yourselves without any process more formal than recommending to the full city council to vote to do so. No organizing, no petitions, no signatures, just do it because you care about us and our opinions. This is where my presentation prepared stops. I'm in conflict with the people who've said we've had enough time in this city to participate in the hearings that the different committees have held and to have a full understanding of what this plan is about. I don't believe anybody understands what this plan is about. You know, there are things that change all the time. I don't believe I do believe that most people in this city are just trying to lead their lives. They're trying to get up, go to work, get their kids out to school, come home, spend a few hours with their kids again, or just relax with their spouses or whomever. And that's the day. And there is no way in this city where they can sit back and look at even a weekly newspaper anymore. There's no journal that gets put into our mailboxes every week that says, here's what's going on in Newton, not only about government, but about schools and about there's just nothing that happens. I believe this committee, I don't know about this referendum anymore. I don't think 4 paragraphs can possibly describe what this plan is about. It is much too big. I think this committee and the city council in full ought to develop a comprehensive review of what this plan is about, present it to the people no later than September 1st.
Carl,
And
I have
ask
to ask
them
you to
to
wrap
read
up.
it
Time is
and
up.
vote on November 7th. Thank you very much. Sorry for rambling.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. The next name I have is Wemples, which I'm going to guess is short for Wendy Plaskanik, but probably way off. Wemples?
That's right.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Wendy Plesniak, and I live in part of Newton Corner along the Washington Street zone that is going to be zoned VC3 in draft 2. I'm going to adapt what I was going to say because what that guy just said. I have been somewhat involved throughout the whole process, from early design meetings to information meetings to giving feedback on version 1.0 and so forth. My concerns were desperately about the size of the VC3 zone here in Newton Corner. And version 2.0 changes have responded to that by actually increasing the size of the VC3 zone. I'm in a butter to it, and the only information I have gotten outside of going and actively informing myself on the web and at meetings is this. This is one little mailing that came to me this week saying, hey, you're in a butter. Would you like to come to a meeting to discuss VCOD? That's it. Now, I also happen to run a neighborhood group here, which has upwards of 100 people. And many of these people are abutters also to VC3 in Newton Corner. And most of them have no idea what's going on. Now, they're aware that the city is doing something. I send out information, and people say, well, I haven't got a chance to look for it yet. I've been so busy. I've been so crazy. It is quite a luxury to have time to go to informational meetings or public hearings in the evenings or to attend design sessions. And I think it's completely inappropriate to think that if one hasn't been able to do that, that their opinion shouldn't count. It's just not right. Every voice should be heard. And there is a pattern whereby we find out that something is going to be on the ballot and we take time to educate ourselves and come in educated, and cast a vote. I think people are expecting that. And I think they'd be disappointed that that was denied them in this case. If the language that will be on the ballot measure is in question, I believe Peter Harrington said he's willing to adapt the language or work on the language. So I think every voice should be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Plesniak. Next person I have is Mary Lee Belville. Ms. Belville, I know you're at so many of our meetings. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Mary Lee Belville, 136 Warren Street. I'm going to try to read my comments so I stay on point. I'm here as someone who's been very engaged in the Village Center rezoning discussions, including participating in, I think it was the 2020 visioning kit. I submitted a kit. My claim to fame, I guess, is that one of my pictures that I submitted lives on in the zoning or the planning department's presentations. It's nice that they liked my picture, but it didn't really represent what's being presented. I'm not here tonight to debate the substance of what's being proposed. I'm already on record that I have concerns and objections. I'm here because I believe that the engagement that has been done so far is insufficient to gauge the buy-in or support or lack thereof of the residents. That's notwithstanding the comments made by Tom Gagan or Nancy Zoller that the efforts may have been above and beyond, but efforts aren't results. And unfortunately, the data that has been derived is just not sufficient. So, we have just about shy of 90,000 residents in Newton and 62,000 voters based upon the election. And last election, I believe that there were less than 1,000 participants in the visioning kit process. And these are numbers I'm taking off the top of my head. I could be off 1,000 people, but it's going to be irrelevant in the grand scheme of whether we're talking about statistically significant samples. So we had about 1,000 participants in the visioning kit. I think we had about 2,000 participants in the last year's engagement exercise. By any standard, that's just not a significantly significant sample to decide what is the will of the voters. There's also a public hearing scheduled for the end of June, but the timing is really challenging. I suspect the participation, both because of the timing and historically, that's not going to produce significantly more data that would say that the voters or the residents of Newton support this. And so because of those reasons, I support the ballot question being placed on the ballot. And I believe anyone who truly wants to understand the will of the residents should support that as well. I don't see the point of quibbling over the exact wording. As Peter Harrington said, he's willing to discuss that. It's not the wording of the question. It's whether we should ask a question to the voters of whether they support what's being proposed. So
Ms. Belville, I do have to ask you to wrap up.
Oh, I'm sorry, lost track of time. Okay, I've said what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would dispute, I do think you also have another claim to fame. Are you not on the off-leash task force as well?
I certainly am,
Okay.
along with my dear friend Susan Albright.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next name is Kathleen, I'm guessing that's Kathleen Carril-Greaser.
Grazer, yes, it is. Thank you. I'm going to read my statement to stay on time. Good evening. I'm Kathleen Carril-Grazer, 258 Mill Street. I urge this committee and the full city council to vote in favor of this petition to put a non-binding question on the ballot for the November 2023 municipal election to obtain
a sense of the will of the electorate on proposed zoning changes that would incentivize the transformation of Newton's villages and neighborhoods. Because of the complexity of zoning, the often changing parameters of what's being proposed, and the conflicting objectives of Newton's upzoning plans and those of the Commonwealth, those Newton voters who are aware that change is looming are uncertain and anxious about the specifics. The much bigger problem is that most Newton residents and small business owners seem to be completely unaware that dramatic upzoning is being plotted by this administration's planning staff and the pro-developer advocates on the city council. Enabling this ballot question would give Newton's elected leaders a much clearer picture of what the people you have been elected to serve think about the proposed upzoning overhaul. If they oppose it, then hopefully you will adjust your plans. At the very least, you would know you have to do a much, much better job of outreach and informing everyone in Newton about who stands to gain and who stands to lose by what you are contemplating. Finally, I'd like to observe that in a time of global warming and rising sea levels, a time of conflict between democracies and oppressive regimes, and a time of extremism, disinformation, and loss of trust in institutions at all levels of government, and a worsening gap between the power and wealth of those at the top and those in the middle class or aspiring to it, I cannot understand how you could wish to upzone our community for the benefit of wealthy property speculators and cause gentrification, displacement of our most vulnerable residents, tree loss, and profoundly negative environmental impacts from high-density construction, or why you would want to force more people into a life of rental servitude with no chance of owning their home and building transgenerational equity and security, and why you would wish to impose a way of life that discriminates against the elderly, the disabled, women, children, and marginalized people who cannot bike or safely manage public transit at certain times of the day or at all. You may not like what you hear, but your ethical responsibility is to allow the Newton residents you serve a chance to vote on this ballot question. If the city's outreach has been sufficient, the voters will let you know. In a real democracy, what do you have to fear from a non-binding vote? And as Stephen Farrell said, why not have a binding referendum? You have the power to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next name I have is Janine Stewart. Looks like there are two of you there, but Ms. Stewart.
And my mother, Ann Stewart, is at 25 Lincoln Road.
I'm sorry, can you start again? We were having trouble hearing you there at the beginning. Maybe speak a little louder.
Janine Stewart, and I'm with 251 Adams Street, and my mother, Antoinette Stewart, is at 25 Lincoln Road. I made some notes for myself here. I'd like to define what the village centers are because I know our end of Adams Street is all commercial. So I mean, I'm concerned with the village centers also, but also in my area of Adams Street. So I'd like that defined. I think if we do that, we're going to drive out the local vendors in the village centers, at least here in Northampton. I think Northampton has too much development, and I believe probably more than any other village. The green space is dwindling. Anytime a development is done, they point to the perimeter of the property as green space, and it's only because they can't build on that. They're really, no one has a yard anymore. There's no green space.
That's me.
We voted to put people in to fight development, and I have not seen any progress on that at all. And I think if there is more development with all these units, they're going to require more schools. And I mean, that's all I have. Do you have anything?
Well, I'd lose my yard, that's for sure. I'm very lucky to be here since 1950s. And I have a nice home with a nice yard, but I don't want a four story building next to me. You know, and also I am going to be invaded with traffic on Lincoln Road because of the 200 or so apartments that they're putting up in Newtonville.
Right.
And it's going to be a terrible, nobody has room to park their cars Except I'm fortunate, I have enough room for a lot of cars. But
The traffic on both Adams Street and Pratt Street is
yeah.
backed up every morning.
yeah, and it's gonna be worse once they get those apartments built.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have 5 more hands at the moment. What I want to say is if you're interested in speaking, have not yet spoken, please raise the electronic hand. Again, down at the bottom of the screen probably is a tab called Reactions. And within that should be the prompt to raise hand. Anyone who wants to speak can speak for up to 3 minutes. Norma Swenson. There you go.
Okay, thank you. My name is Norma Swenson. I live at 144 Ridge Avenue in Newton Center. I have been living in Newton since 1950. I think I might be an age mate to the previous speaker because I remember how things were in the 50s. Newton is the only place I've ever voted, and I have become extremely interested in the voting crisis in this country. I want to encourage everyone to read the New York Times editorial board opinion piece entitled "States Are Silencing the Will of Millions of Voters." You really need to read it. You may think it's about people of color, and it certainly is, but more serious than that, it's about everyone who thinks they have a right to say something about what's happening in their local communities. The idea being that other people will decide for you. Okay. No one questioned the need to vote recently on the override because it affects the city's future for several years to come. It seems only right that we have an override law and the chance for an override vote, even though the city council also votes on budget matters and the mayor makes many decisions herself. Some issues are simply too big, too serious, and have consequences that are far-reaching and permanent. It should be obvious that the zoning of our city, the rezoning, the demolishing multiple historic buildings, slaughtering dozens upon dozens of healthy shade trees that will never be replaced, is far more permanent than any budget, which shifts anyway all the time. Your support for giving Newton voters a chance to vote on zoning changes is crucial, regardless of how you yourself may vote. Because this is an organized, well-funded movement out there in this country to try to take your local vote away. It's very serious and is very well funded. We think you agree that everyone deserves the opportunity to vote on the most crucial, urgent issues facing our city, and for most of us, very personal issues about how and where we live, whether or not anyone chooses to vote. I submit that the zoning redesign proposals are 10 to 15 times more consequential than any budget that requires an override. Most of these zoning proposals will result in changes to our city forever, permanently. We need a state law, pretty much like the override law, Proposition 2.5.
Ms. Swenson, I do have to ask you to wrap up. The time has expired.
That will challenge any municipality to give citizens the vote. This is the only vote you're going to have, folks. You should approve it.
Thank you very much. The next name I have is Russ Feldman. Mr. Feldman, are you there?
I am, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Russell Feldman. I live at 85 Langley Road in Newton Center. Zoning is very complex. It affects almost every physical facet of our city. Many of the issues raised this evening reflect this. Our speakers have expressed concerns with overdevelopment and its impact on infrastructure, construction noise and disruption, a lack of city oversight, gentrification, loss of our trees, and a perceived lack of residents' understanding about the rezoning plans. All these are legitimate concerns, but none of them relate to Mr. Harrington's proposal. Mr. Harrington's proposal identifies several other important concerns, including building height, lot size, parking, affordable housing. And these are also very important, in fact, too important to be considered in isolation, as is unfortunately characteristic of a referendum process. I believe the council should pursue its comprehensive zoning process, including continuing outreach and communication to the community. Relating to this petition, I encourage the committee to determine that no action is necessary so we can better consider Mr. Harrington's concerns as part of the bigger picture. It's too important to pick apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Appreciate it. The next name I have is Dan Rubin. Mr. Rubin? Mr. Rubin, you're still on mute. I'm sorry. But fortunately, the time hasn't begun, so you have time to unmute and begin again. Excellent.
Thank you, Councilor Chrisman. I live at 175 Auburn Street. The planning department, the city councilors and others have worked very hard for several years to prepare a package that would enable Newton to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. They've held many sessions that have provided citizens with the opportunity for input. I've gone to some, and they were very well attended. So the notion that somehow we haven't given citizens the opportunity for input, I don't think is right. We should allow city councilors to present their proposal and the planning department to present its proposal in its entirety before picking at parts of it. There will be time to do that on January 26th and after. Let's see the entirety of the proposal on June 26th before judging it. I think I said January before, I meant June 26th. Citizens will have the opportunity to provide input again at that hearing and probably later. If city council votes now to add a ballot question, it would be a distraction and an insult to those who've worked so hard to develop a proposal that would comply with the law. So I urge councilors to allow the original proposal, the original process to proceed and not approve a ballot question. I'm going to give more extensive testimony on June the 26th, but I want to address one point raised by several previous participants. The planning proposal, as stated, is very important for addressing climate change. It will enable more residents to live near transit, work, shopping, and residence. It will reduce driving. The current zoning forces suburban sprawl that makes people drive more and harms our future. This point is particularly important on a day in which we could smell smoke from Canadian wildfires. Almost everybody here tonight that has testified is older, or older residents. And it's the young people that have the most at stake here, because they're the ones that could live into the latter half of the 21st century, and they have the most at stake as to whether we address climate change firmly or give up on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. The next name I saw signed up was Wendy Landon.
Hello, can you see me?
Can see you and hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. My name is Wendy Landon. I live at 40 Oldfield Road. My husband and I have lived in our house since 1997 and have raised our two daughters, now 26 and 28. One now lives in London. One is a medical resident, just moved to Philadelphia because housing here is simply too expensive and she thought she could have a better life in Philadelphia. We moved to Newton because it was close to Boston, in town where I work, and close to the medical area, yet maintained a suburban characteristics and culture. I am a direct abutter to the 528 Boylston project. I won't go into that now, but having worked on that and learned about that, I can assure you that many Newtonians have no idea what is going on with this zoning redesign. People are uninformed. To say that there have been meetings, I appreciate that. I personally, only through being a direct abutter of 528, have gotten more knowledgeable about what is going on in Newton, with over 800 signatures opposing that. Many, if not most of those people, do not know about these zoning changes. I think that we have all made long-term investments. Many people have talked about the taxes that are going on. I simply implore you, we can quibble about the language of the ballot, but putting something on a ballot and bringing it to Newtonians where they have to vote on it and it gets more attention will let people focus. I think that's critical to what's going on. And to think that because this has been out there, which it has, and there have been meetings, unfortunately, it's simply in today's day and time, not the most efficient way to get people's attention. I think something that will change the fabric of Newton, potentially for the future, deserves all transparency and deserves enabling the citizens of Newton's voices to be heard. So for that reason, I support a ballot question. And if language needs to be changed, I'm sure that can happen, but this absolutely needs to come to a ballot.
Thank you, Ms. Landon. And thank you for putting up with what was probably some parking on your street today for the Newton South graduation. Next name I see is Annie Wright.
Hi, this is Annie Wright. I lived at 56 Bowden Street in the Highlands. I had not planned on speaking, but I've listened to many of you. Here are a couple things. First of all, I didn't know about this until today. So I know how hard my counselor works. And so I imagine all of you that are on the committee have worked very, very hard. That doesn't mean we know about it. I don't know about this. I've never heard of 528. I don't know what that is. I consider myself fairly well informed, yet I'm not totally in the dark, because I went online and looked to see what my, the Highlands, what the plan was for that. But I don't know about a lot of these other things. And among the things that this boils down to is an informed citizenship. And as hard as you all have worked on it, you still don't have it. You still do not have an informed citizenship. I too got that postcard that said, come to the meeting on the 26th because you're in a butter. And a butter for what? Why not say, and to find out what it is, go to online and look at this. And not just you're in a butter. I think that was really too simplistic. Now, I understand the difficulty of getting the words right so that you mean what you say. I've worked in interculturalism and I know the value of words. So I'm not going to propose what wording should be, but I think there needs to be either a paper document that goes to every single house so that you can see the picture and see what's going to happen and see the numbers. Otherwise, you're going to really not have an informed citizenship. I moved to Newton because I didn't want to live in Waltham. So I don't want the Walthamization of Newton. On the other hand, I don't want to be all snooty and say not in my backyard. So I understand that there should be certain things that we do. So the balancing all these things out, I think, is really key. And I do implore you to do something. I'm in favor of I know it'll be expensive, but it's going to end several pages, that you make a document that you send to everyone that explains all this. I do applaud your work and I thank you for working on my behalf. I just want to know what you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. The next thing, welcomeization, by the way, good word. That's up there with hubristic. Lori DeVoe, you had your hand up at one point. Perhaps it was a mistake. Perhaps I'm mispronouncing it.
No, it's okay. My name is Laura DeVoe and I live at 12 Proctor Street in Newtonville. I am a renter. I am not an owner. I have lived in Newton since 2008. And I wasn't sure, I was not planning again on speaking, but I do have two things to say after listening to folks. At this point, I think one of the things that's blurring this call is there's a lot of people that are misinformed, uninformed, or not formed. And I'm one of them. And I think what has happened, and I'm on the Newtonville Area Council, and we have a survey that we're doing about the rezoning. And I'm happy to share that information with you if you want to email me at ldevoe@newtonmass.gov. I'm happy to give that to you. That being said, we have a trust problem. We have a trust problem in the city where people, no matter what side of the world they're on, don't trust what's happening. They either don't trust the city, they don't trust their neighbor, they don't trust the construction folks, they don't trust. They also don't trust renters. And I hear that loud and clear from people who I have spoken to in Newtonville who live in and rent here. I was told on Memorial Day at the Memorial Day Parade by a person who lives in the Trio building, when I gave them information on our survey, that she appreciated being asked to participate because when she goes and meets people and they say, "Where do you live?" and she says Trio, they turn their nose up. We need to be better neighbors. We need to be better people. And the city and all of us need to start to think about how do we amplify our ability to gain trust with one another, or whatever the outcome of this is, it's going to be lousy. Because if you don't trust the outcome, doesn't matter how many meetings we have and how many opportunities we have to vote. Trust is very important, and every single action in this needs to be focused on trust. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. DeVoe. Next person I saw sign up was Terry Sorrow. Terry, you there?
Yes, sorry.
No worries, please go
I
ahead.
wasn't going to speak. Terry Sarah, 44 Cook Street, but I'm sitting here listening with a broken arm, which I should be in Missoula, Montana at my granddaughter's wedding. But I'm listening to this and I'm saying, what is going on in this city? I have lived here all my life on Lincoln Road. I was born in 1946. Yes, development. I can't put my trust in the city councils. I'm sorry. I've gone to numerous meetings, and you know I'm an activist, especially in Nonantum, and I don't know what that other person was talking. In Nonantum, we are a community. We care about us. We care about our neighbors. We're always trying to develop and talk, and I don't. We went to a meeting about the development on California Street. I can't believe that they hired someone to like design something. So I had a question. I said, this looks all lovely. I said, but you don't own this property. There's 13 people that own these properties. So if you own the property, you could say yes, 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 but these people don't. So we have a biolab coming. So Watertown Street, it's a business zone. It's under 12,000 square feet. They want to put, they're coming to land use. They want to put 5 townhouses. It's just gotten out of hand. I don't know what the question, how to bring it back. Of course we need development, but it has to be scaled. On Watertown Street, they're talking about where Swartz Hardware going up and putting apartments up there. It's crazy. And listening to everybody, and we've gone numerous meetings, public meetings. I just don't know if it falls on deaf ears, but I support this going on to the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aro. Next name I had was Robert Kavanaugh.
Yeah, hi, Bob Kavanaugh, 69 Court Street. My wife and I have been here for over 40 years. It seems that the general argument against placing Mr. Harrington's citizen petition on the ballot is that it's not perfect. I remind folks of this idea that don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. All right, I agree, it may not be perfect. And the other argument seems to be that, well, gee, Newton people have had ample opportunity to participate. And if they haven't, well, that's their problem. And I have to say, I find that attitude extremely arrogant and elitist. As Mr. Rubin himself pointed out, it's mainly been us old folks who have been participating. Why? Because the younger people, when I was raising 3 kids, I didn't have time for this stuff. So to say that, oh, people didn't participate, that's it. Now, I'm in favor of the petition being placed on the ballot, obviously. Why? The zoning changes will have a major impact on residents' lives, much more so than a 2.5 override. And yet we get to vote on 2.5 overrides. I'm told I should trust the city government to do this, but they're not trusted to do a budget override. So I'm not quite sure, because I think zoning changes are much more impactful than a temporary tax increase. Citizens need to have an opportunity to have a strong voice on such a dramatic change to their living environment. So I strongly urge you to vote to put this on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. I have 2 more hands, and I want to just remind anyone who hasn't spoken, if you're interested in speaking, please raise your virtual hand. It should be under the reactions prompt tab on your Zoom screen, and then raise hand. And again, I'll call on you in the order in which the hands are raised. Next hand I see is Simon French. Mr. French?
Hi, good evening. Simon French, 47 Glen Avenue. I'm not quite sure why, but I can't get on video. First of all, I was intrigued by Mr. Rubin's ideas of mainly the older folks. I don't think I'm associated with the younger lot, and I don't think I'm the older lot, so I must be the missing middle. Look, I'm going to take a slightly different tact on this. I obviously associate myself with getting this thing on the ballot. I hope when you deliberate this, you ask yourselves why the citizens can, get 50 signatures and get something to yourselves to be considered. And also, I'd like you to consider maybe a ballot question could be a bellwether for those talking about a referendum. If you are brave enough to have this ballot question and it fails miserably, then you're not going to get a referendum. Just a thought for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. French. Agnes? Is it not Agnes? I apologize if it's not Agnes. It's something else, but there you go. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Agnes Olshansky. I live on 20 Sutcliffe Park. I came from the former Soviet Union. You can tell by my accent, and I think it's important to say this. I have a lot of friends who also came from former Soviet Union. I'm pretty active in our Russian-speaking community in Newton, which is pretty significant. And we're all interested, and I'm very interested what's going on. We participate in different elections and referendums and trying to learn more about the country. Even we've all been in the country more than 30 years, certain aspects is still puzzling for us. The thing that I want to share, as much as I'm interested in this rezoning, I feel that we don't have enough information what's going on in Newton. And I really encourage you and my friends who talk to me about that and who are not able to participate, ask me to say, please put this question on the ballot. And also, unfortunately, I have to agree with other speakers who are talking about lack of trust in the government. It's very unfortunate that the perception in general that our city councilor don't represent us. They represent, unfortunately, developers. I live very close to Northland. Every time that I drive on Needham Street, I'm just horrified what's coming. Needham Street is not passable now. I can just imagine what's going to happen when it's going to be 850 apartments built on Needham Street. Please consider what I said in your decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Olszewski. Mr. Harrington, I do see your hand up again. I'm going to go to other folks who haven't spoken yet. And then after everyone has had an opportunity to testify, we'll see if folks want to speak again. Gail?
Hi, I'm Gail Deegan. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm Gail Deegan. I live at 240 Upland Road off of Mill Street in Newtonville. I've lived here since 1978, so I've lived here 45 years. During that time, I have seen major issues come up in the city that also raised a lot of angst and uncertainty. There was a great controversy over whether we should build a new library, which now is one of the busiest in the country for its size. There was concern about Newton North and what it would be. I will say that I feel that a village means that people can walk around, support the businesses that are there, be a community. And right now, we're a drive-through. And I think we're a drive-through, I'm speaking of Newtonville, because we don't have enough people around. That's just one comment I have. One thing I haven't heard today, and I know having been in decision-making positions that this is kind of lost in it, is what's the goal, or what are the goals that we're trying to accomplish in the rezoning? I think one of our goals is that we want to help the whole area around here to have more affordable housing. And I don't want to get into the discussion about what the rents would be, but we know clearly there's not affordable housing in Newton. There's not affordable housing in the greater Boston area. We sit, and Newtonville certainly sits at a point where there is much public transportation. And if we are thinking about ourselves and not a bigger picture of Newton and the greater Boston area, then we'll worry about ours. What's it mean for us? I've seen the McMansions going up, and personally, I think that is a big problem, far more than the apartments. What we're talking about tonight, I think, is a process. And this process has been going on for years. I encourage everyone who thinks they don't know what's going on in Newton to sign up for Mayor Fuller's weekly newsletter that comes out. People are busy. I wasn't involved that much when I was working and had my small children, but it's not the fault of the council or the mayor that we don't know what's going on. And so I really believe we have to trust, and someone raised that question, we have to trust what our councilors do. And if we don't trust them, then we vote them out of office. But I think that we've really got to, think about why are we doing this anyhow? And not is it 4.5 stories or 7 stories? I ask you to look at your centers right now and ask yourself, are they vibrant, thriving centers? Are they places where people gather, where small businesses can be successful, where people can live and walk in that area? I can say for Newtonville, that's not the case. And it's
Ms. Deegan, I have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, so I am not in favor of this proposal because I think people still will not know what's going on and will just add another layer of complexity and angst to the process. And I want to thank the council for what they're doing in the Planning Commission.
Thank you very much. I think it was Ms. DeVoe who raised the issue of trust, by the way. The next name I see is Ellen. Ellen?
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Ellen Whaley, and I live at 30 Bird Avenue in West Newton. I wasn't planning on speaking, so my thoughts are not organized. In the past, I've done that in an organized way. I found out about this meeting yesterday on the West Newton listserv. I don't care about what is said on the ballot, but I think that There is not enough information. When I'm in these meetings, I see the same people speaking and I don't even know who they are, and I know what they're going to say, and I don't know them. I do agree that generally I'm looking at older people here tonight, and I put myself, I hate to say it, in that category. I'm married to a guy who works from 7 to 7 every day. So he works a 12-hour day. He does not have time to listen to these meetings, and we do not have children at home. So the fact that people have really busy lives, I think really, it's just one of the really complex aspects of this. I would say we don't have a newspaper and people are not informed. I would say to people, and I know a lot of the city council, I say, what are you afraid of? Because I think we need facts and we need to talk about how people really live and how we are. I don't think people have any idea about what's going on. I think that people on this call know what's going on and they're very engaged, and I do honor all the work. I really do. I have incredible respect for anyone who would run for city council, and I have incredible respect for Mayor Fuller. I would say that we do not have an informed 62,000 citizenship. I think the affordable housing is a really interesting question. I think it's something else, but I do not believe that what is being built is affordable. I think these are very complex issues at a very complex time in our state and country, and the world is shifting. So I'd be happy to have coffee with any of you, but I do think that we should have something, whether or not it's this, on the ballot to make people informed, because I talk to people every single day who have no idea what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm talking no idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark Hirschman.
Thank you very much. I too wasn't particularly planning to speak or had prepared remarks, but I am compelled to share. And this is about democratic process, not just the zoning. The zonings have enough problems, as most people don't realize. I'm an architect, urban designer. We have an architects group that have been trying to share information, and that has not been received with open ears, and that's another issue. So this is an opportunity for the public to participate. And as imperfect as the proposal might be at this point, the committee has a chance to help have the community participate. And Attorney Harrington would be glad to tweak it, to make it meet the current zoning. And the reason why it doesn't meet the current proposal is because it's a moving target. We've been engaged endlessly, day to day, what the planning department has been doing. And it has been, to this day, an incomplete moving target. The VC1 type, just to get into one specific, is a typology of an oversized housing piece that'll be imposed in our residential neighborhoods. It's form-based. It doesn't even have lot area. The footprint is 4,000 square feet, way out of scale of our normal homes. Our homes are 800 square feet, 1,200 square feet. They want residential structures, 4,000 square feet without lot size. This is a totally new paradigm. You haven't heard about this, and they're going with this. We need them to pause. The public hearing is too soon. Once it's public hearing, they'll just hear what we have to do in one ear and out the other. Even now, when we can participate, they aren't fully hearing. I really like our president of the council, Susan Albright. Even she said Walnut Street should be 3.5 stories, and they're still doing 4.5 stories. So that's frightening. We need to participate, and we need the committee to engage this proposal so that the public can weigh in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschman. Annie Rains. Ms. Rains, you're still muted. But like I said, you still have your 3 minutes, so don't worry.
Excellent, thank you. My name is Annie Rains. I live at 50 Court Street in Newtonville. And like others who've spoken recently, I was not prepared to speak, but first of all, want to thank the members of the City Council who are here and thank the people who have spoken so far for being so eloquent on the issue, far more than I could be. I was really moved by various people's statements about trust. I think there were at least 3 people who did make mention of it. And I think it really raises a good point that if you're going to increase the population of the city and have a lot more people here, it would be good if we understood how to treat people before that, rather than trying to figure it out in the mix. But one thing I wanted to point out that I'm not sure has been mentioned is on the issue of unaffordable housing. Every time a market rate development is built and you have 100 or 200 units of market rate or luxury housing, that comes with a veritable army of workers providing all these amenities that are part of luxury developments. And I've seen many more people standing at the T-stop waiting to go back home to wherever they can afford to live. So when we're talking about changing the zoning to increase density, we're not talking about affordable housing. In fact, what we're talking about is creating more of a visiting worker class that comes to Newton, that takes 3 buses from Brockton or 3 trains and connects, and then goes back home. People who drive, people who drop their spouses off at Trio to work in the CVS or at the Chipotle. And it's not necessarily reducing dependence on cars. It's not necessarily reducing carbon to be building denser housing. Affordable housing is kind of a different story, because if people can live where they work, that really cuts down on the carbon footprint. So it's worth considering that this has been a very iterative process for the City Council, and that there are some layers going on here that are being introduced. And very interesting having all these different angles building into it. And I think it could be a really holistic way of approaching it, to have a ballot question, but also to bring in these discussions on different angles and really, meditate on what it means to do better here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rains. The only 2 hands I see are folks who have spoken before. So let me just first see if there's anyone who hasn't spoken yet who wants to speak. Again, the way to raise the hand electronically is under the reactions tab, and you can put your hand up. If there's anyone who's having trouble electronically raising a hand, let me just give an opportunity right now to unmute and just say, so that I can acknowledge your name and put you on the list. Okay. Not hearing that that's the case for anyone. If it is, at any point, unmute, jump in, interrupt, and I'll at least mark your name down and call on you afterwards. Mr. Kane.
Hi there. So my name is Jeffrey Kane. I live at 157 Newtonville Ave. Whoops, sorry, let me take these out. I also did not even know about this meeting until after it began. So I've been a longtime resident of Newton. There are numerous issues as far as the concept that people are aware of any of this that's going on. We got an abutters notice, I think yesterday, that just simply said we were in a abutter, again, with no reference or information whatsoever as to what the issues were, what was going to be discussed, so that we could prepare a coherent response. I appreciate the people that have been involved in these discussions, throughout, and have gone to meetings and have the luxury of time. unfortunately, I represent a couple different groups. I'm an older resident, but I also have a younger child that's not even in grade school yet. So I get the benefit of both points of view. And we moved here with the concept that the city would be zoned certain ways. And that doesn't mean that there doesn't have to be change. But having said that, we also want to provide an environment for our children that they can grow up and they can live in a community that we want to be part of. There are many areas around Boston that are completely overpopulated and are urbanized beyond the infrastructure that's allowed. Where I live on Newtonville Ave, we see cars going 40, 50 miles an hour flying down the streets. And I've been to many city council and meetings where, you know, lip service has been paid to correcting that or trying to mitigate it. But I actually fear for the lives of some of the children that live along the street on a regular basis. And I mean, daily while I'm walking my dog. So it's a huge problem to develop without concept of what the infrastructure will allow. And I think that a lot of this push for the benefit of developers and the development for monetization of the community is without merit. The concept that people know what's going on is not accurate in any way, shape, or form. Again, I got one green postcard that simply said there will be a meeting and you should know what it's about, because how many people are going to respond to that? They'll look at it, and if they live busy lives, my work life is more than 80, 90 hours a week. So the concept that I have time and effort, that I'm mitigating my community effort by not going to these meetings also is without merit.
Mr. Kane, I do have to
The
ask
city
you to wrap up.
council owes a public referendum on these concepts so that people are aware that there is major changes to the community and what they've invested their life savings into, what they plan to raise their children with.
Mr. Kane, I do have
And
to
I
ask
hope
you to
that
wrap
the
up.
council votes to at least allow that kind of publicity and not a simple postcard, again, without a newspaper, without any public
Mr. Kane?
information being developed anymore. So I thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize. Okay. Sorry, once again, the hands I see have spoken. I'm going to come to you in one moment. Let me just give folks an idea of what to expect. As folks know, this is a docket item that's before the Programs and Services Committee of the City Council. So at the conclusion of public testimony, what we will probably do is close the public hearing, and then the city councilors can debate the item. And hopefully at the end of tonight, we'll get to the point where the Programs and Services Committee can take a vote on the item. So the conclusion of public testimony is not the end. You're welcome to stick around and watch us debate, but it will be the end of public participation so that the committee and the city council can get its work done. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken who would like to speak? Again, I want to make sure everyone who wishes to has had an opportunity to testify. Before I go back for a second round, I'm happy to go for a second round if folks have more they want to say or more that they feel was omitted or not said by earlier testimony.
It looks like one person has their hand up that didn't speak.
Who is that, Councilor Humphrey?
Wendy Landon.
Wendy Landon spoke.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It was impressive. She's on Oldfield Road, I believe, and she's quite literally flexing her muscles at us, but that's impressive as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Gail G, I don't believe you have spoken. Did you want to?
Hello, hi, I'm Gail Gordon.
Please go
I live at 32 Walnut Place, Newtonville. After hearing what you said about when people are all done talking, that you're going to take a vote, I just want to say one thing. In taking a tally, there were more people that want a ballot, a referendum on the ballot than the people that did not. And I urge all the council people, thank you for your work. I appreciate it. I was born and bred in Newton. I live in Newtonville. I went to Newton High School. I just want to urge you to think before you vote on voting to have this on a ballot, that it will affect all the villages and all the citizens, and we do need our voice. So please give us our voice. We need to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else. I want to give a quick shout out. I think I saw our state senator Cindy Cream was here earlier. Welcome, Senator Cream. And my former neighbor, Peggy Poper. Welcome, Ms. Poper. Seeing no one who hasn't not spoken, raise their hand. Let me go. We'll start a second round if we want. Mr. Harrington, I did have you first. So 3 more minutes is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank everyone who has spoken, those who have spoken in favor of the petition and those who have spoken against it. I think a number of very good points have been brought to our attention. I think you and I and the other lawyers on the city council have a problem. We are trained to take a side and represent that side and go forward with it. And I understand that you have now been placed in the awkward position of being a mediator, not a lawyer. And so it's to that position that I would like to speak for just a minute. I think it's important for your committee to first make a decision whether or not they think a question should be put on the ballot. The language of the question, while important, is not as important as the decision should the voters have a chance to be heard. And their decision, their vote is not binding, but it's just a vote so that you can have an opportunity to know where they stand. If you do decide to go forward and you would like any assistance from me, I'd be very happy to help work with the language or provide an opposite opinion to that of the planning department. I think there are 2 sides to each of these issues that are being presented, and I think that a full and fair display of those issues to the public would benefit everybody. I thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I have 2 more people who had raised their hands, but I do see a couple of new hands, so I'm going to take those folks because they haven't spoken yet. Sherry Golden. And I apologize to anyone if I'm mispronouncing your name. Please correct me. Sherry Golden.
Nope, you have that correct. And I'm at 472 Waltham Street. And I was not planning on speaking, or I wasn't sure. I'm feeling a little stuck today. I mean, this is clearly a very complicated issue, many issues on either side, but I inevitably feel that we need to have a voice. I mean, everybody needs to have a voice, and we need to have this much more understood. I'm speaking both as a resident and also as a realtor. And I work with a lot of people who move to Newton and who are moving from Newton. And I'm stuck sometimes about telling them what to do. And that is really unfortunate because I need to be an expert. And I am following each of these stages very carefully, and the goalposts keep moving. So something is very, very wrong here. And it is an enormous change. People need to know what's going on. And people need to have a say and be able to speak. So for that reason, I would say, yes, we need to have the petition on the ballot, but more so, I really appreciate that we're having the opportunity to all speak now. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Golden. Marcia Cooper. Ms. Cooper, you're still muted. Okay, there we go.
Marcia Cooper at 170 Evelyn Road. I've attended many of these meetings. This has been going on for years. When people say that I didn't know and they blame the city councilors or whoever, it's not the city council's fault. We have an amazing city council. Whether I agree with every city councilor or not, they're at meetings till 10, 11 o'clock at night, working their tails off to get information out to the community. It's not the residents' fault if they're busy with work and kids that they don't know. But I don't believe that this resolution will be the way to educate people. There are other opportunities. There's many meetings coming up. I know in June, I'm working with youth leaders with Green Newton, and I'm encouraging them to attend meetings and to become informed. I think I can understand how people who are not well informed might have qualms or resistance to change in the city. As somebody brought up, when the new library was proposed, people were adamantly opposed to it, and how we love that library. Newton North is my kids went to the old Newton North and it was a horrible building, and people opposed it, and it cost millions of dollars more for the delay. Our community, I believe, is going to suffer if we don't increase housing in village centers. And I wish the people who are so adamantly opposed would understand the advantages of the proposed zoning changes. Whether or not you approve worries me that people will think that they're well informed and get caught up in a people say, well, it's not, I'm not opposed. I want affordable housing, and I don't think that, we should, somebody brought up about people who work in the city, who work in restaurants. We're going to just be pushing people out further and further if we don't create housing where the jobs are and along the MBTA line. So there's two sides of the story. I try to listen to the people who have concerns, but in the end, I really wholeheartedly support housing, more housing, affordable housing, sustainable housing along in the village centers and the MBTA lines. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Jill Geiger.
Hi, thank you. I joined late, so I'm sorry if I address things that have been already addressed. But basically, I don't see a reason why not to have this on the ballot. It's a non-binding question. It's a way for people who may not have been aware of these issues to look into them and see, learn more about what's happening in Newton regarding development. So I hope you'll put it on the. I hope you'll consider having it on the ballot, and thank you.
Thank you. Next hand I see is Barbara.
Hi. I also think it's important to be on the ballot. I have been following this issue for a couple of years, and I know that none of the people I know understand all the complexities of the issue and what is happening. And I know that putting it on the ballot is just one chance for people to look, and not everybody reads what's on the ballot, but the level of people who are uninformed in the city is unbelievably high. And even those who are informed usually are only informed at the soundbite level. And I just think whatever we can do to have more people, the more people that are involved and the more people that understand it, the more people will have input and the better a plan we can have as a city. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Wendy Landon, Mary Lee Belleville, I saw you each raise your hands. They're down at the moment, but if you did want to say something else, I want to make sure you have the opportunity. Okay. Just want to give a quick shout out to myself, though, for recognizing and giving you the opportunity. Just kidding. Don't worry. Okay. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. Let me give another opportunity for anyone to unmute and tell me that they're having trouble, but they're still interested in testifying. They just can't raise their hand if that's the case. Annie Rains, are you looking to speak again?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was laughing at what you said about your shout out to yourself, but also. Well,
you're always welcome to unmute and tell me that you're laughing at what I've said when I make a joke. So.
Okay, yeah, I will, or I'll at least turn on the video and laugh. For some reason, I can't lower my hand. I think I would encourage you to all the city councilors to think about it this way. After all is said and done, and some people are happy with the changes and some people are miserable about them. Some people know what was going to happen. Some people didn't know. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to say, we had a bleeping referendum. How could you not have known? that might be one of the best tools in the toolkit that the city has to work with in terms of having a sense of a relationship ongoing with the voters, with the residents of the city. It seems like that would be a really useful tool. We had a referendum. You had many opportunities, real opportunities to learn about this. This was disseminated to people regardless of how busy they were. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Alice Ingerson.
Thank you.
I'm here.
Okay, somebody else is talking to. Should that person go first?
No, I think
Okay,
that
all
was
right, okay.
Susan's iPhone, and I think
So
she was talking to
I
someone
was,
in her
I
room.
also wasn't planning to speak, but I'm just gonna say a couple of things. It's important to remember that our current zoning allows for thousands or maybe millions of additional square feet to be built in Newton by right already. And by right, most of those square feet are going to be occupied most of the time in single-family houses only by furniture. They're going to be air-conditioned, heated spaces for furniture. If we add square feet to Newton's housing stock, I wish it would at least house families and not just furniture. A lot of the people that have spoken have pointed out how complex zoning is, and I absolutely agree with that. It's almost impossible to word a useful up or down ballot question about zoning, even if we can agree on what we want the zoning to do. But this particular petition I find confusing because its sponsors want people to vote against it, which I find quite confusing. And I hope that they will consider writing a ballot question outlining the kind of zoning they want people to support, recognizing that our current zoning is as much a part of the problem as it is a solution to the things that worry them. Thank you.
Thank you. A. Caruso. A. Caruso. A. Caruso, your hand is raised. But if you don't unmute and speak, I'm going to move on. Okay, let me take this opportunity. Susan's iPhone had briefly unmuted. Was that to let me know that you're unable to raise your virtual hand and to speak? Want to make sure you have that opportunity now. Okay. In that case, I'm seeing no other hands up at the moment. Okay, if there are no other hands, President Albright, I see your hand is up. I think if there's no one else interested in testifying, we can move to the point where we take this into council. President Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, had some good testimony, and I'd like to move that we close the public hearing so that we can begin the debate within the committee.
Fair enough. Thank you, President Albright. President Albright has moved to close the public hearing. Any discussion on that motion from committee members? Councilor Humphrey, Councilor Wright, did either one of you want to speak to that motion? Okay, just want to make sure. All right, Programs and Services Committee members. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please unmute and say aye.
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 Any opposed to closing the public hearing? Any abstentions? Okay, I believe that's Jacqueline, is that 7-0, I believe?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we have closed the public hearing. Again, thank you to everyone who did testify. At this point, it's going to be just councilors who are going to deliberate and determine what to do next with the petition that we've seen. I have Councilor Crossley, followed by Councilor Humphrey. Councilor Crossley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate a moment to speak. I see there's a lot of people on this call, and I listened to all of the testimony. Of course, it's before your committee because folks are asking for a ballot question, but the ballot question is trying to reflect the work we're doing in the Zoning and Planning Committee. There were a number of things said that I would like to try to help inform, because I think there's a lot of people listening here who are hearing what people are saying tonight, but maybe themselves have not been following the work that we've been doing. So first of all, these 6,000 postcards went out early this week to everyone in the proposed district who either owns a property in the proposed district, is an abutter to it, is an abutter to a butter and a butter, who's a tenant, whether they own a business or whether they are renting an apartment. 6,000, and this represents us, I think somebody did mention, about 3% of the land area of the city of Newton. So these postcards went out just this week, and there are links in the postcards to bring people to the pages on the city website that will give you more information about this project. There's a lot of information, but you can go directly to the version 2 zoning text and version 2 maps. One reason I think people came into this meeting uninformed is that this is not about the zoning proposal. In fact, it's extracted 4 questions that are trying to be, that are related in some way or another to elements that we've been considering that are part of the zoning proposal, but they are taken out of context. And you didn't get a presentation from the planning department in advance of this meeting because this is a citizen's petition that is narrowing the focus of what they want to pay attention to. And of course, these postcards went out to advertise the public hearing that we're going to have in 3 weeks. And on that date, we are opening the public hearing, but it is only the first night. So it's the beginning. There have been many presentations and many open meetings, and I understand that a lot of people can't or don't have the time or don't want to participate in every aspect of local government. And this has been a long, long process. But it's the committee's job to decide when we are at the point when we feel, as elected representatives, that we're at a place finally where we feel we have a product that is worthy of public discourse, that is, at least we feel like it's ready for prime time. But that only begins on June 26th. We're going to leave the public hearing open for the summer and resume public testimony in the fall, in September. It's also important. So this is a project that we undertook in the city of Newton. We agreed upon as the city council, and there have been many, many citizens who have chosen to be involved in this to address some real and serious issues that we have in the city. On top of that, the state came up with the MBTA communities law, which is driving us toward a deadline now, after 1.5 years of work. By the end of this year, our community is required to pass zoning that will meet the terms of this law. It's not the same thing, but because we've done all this work so far, we're able to use a good chunk of it to satisfy the requirements of the MBTA communities law, which is all about providing sufficient housing. So
So I'm taking my hearing aid out and I can't hear her.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Someone
Am I
accidentally
loud
unmuted. Go
enough,
ahead.
Councilor Krinsman?
You are. You're okay.
Okay, thank you. So in what I want to say in particular is the link, one of the links in the postcard. And if you just go online and go to the planning department, there's a whole section on the village center zoning. And in there is not only the version 2 maps and the version 2 text so that you can see what it is we're trying to do. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy for the first timer going to these pages, but there are these information sheets that have been designed and they're in there now. If you're mostly concerned about housing, you can go to that sheet. If you're mostly concerned about just understanding what the proposal is, what the just what the different zones are that would comprise the district. Or if you're just interested in how this addresses climate change, there's these one-page information sheets, 7 or 8 of them, that might be a good introduction. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. If you want to understand the entire proposal, that will take some time. And there are a lot of aspects to it. It's not just about the 4 questions before you that people are proposing to put on the ballot on their own. And both at the city council meeting on June 20th, preceding the city council meeting, so starting at 6 o'clock, there will be a comprehensive presentation by staff and the consultants we've been working with of the entirety of the project. And we will have that presentation or something very similar to it the following week when we open the public hearing, so that anybody who goes to either of those 2 meetings, if you want to go to the first one, to kind of prepare yourself, and then go to the second one, you can hear the presentation again. My teachers always told me that if I left their class retaining 10% of what I heard, that was good. So, you know, it takes a while there's a lot of information for it to sink in and to be able to assimilate it. So it's no surprise to me that a lot of people coming here for the first time tonight don't completely understand and maybe don't understand much of what this proposal is about. So I urge you to, you know, go to these sites, come to the meetings, come to the public hearing, see the presentations, and you know, we'll hear from you again, but about the entirety of the project, why we're doing it, what we're trying to solve, the objectives we've agreed to, how well is our proposal achieving those objectives, are the questions we're asking ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Crossley. One thing I want to do, Councilor Humphrey, I have you next, but if you'll indulge me for a minute. One of the first things that Mr. Harrington said when he began was that he was open to changes in the language, and I know a number of people spoke to potentially modifying the language that was submitted to us via petition before we put it on the ballot. And I just wanted to, Jonah Temple, are you still here? Because I think the legal department, I want to ask the legal department, are there parameters around the abilities of the city council, what we can do with this petition, or what are our options with this petition? Joan, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, well, I certainly appreciate the sentiment of Mr. Harrington to agree to make changes to the question. Unfortunately, because this is governed by a specific state law, it does not give authorization for the council to alter the question as it's been submitted to you.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if the council would like different language, they could adopt a revised version and submit it themselves, but that would require a new docket item.
Okay, so if we were interested in putting a question on the ballot, even along the lines of what Mr. Harrington has said, but it seeks to modify just a couple of words, we need to originate a new process by filing a new docket item and voting to put that on the ballot. Is that right?
That's correct. There can be no changes tonight.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can you ask the city solicitor just to explain that a little more why?
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Sure. Mr. Temple, I don't know if you
Yeah,
heard
so the
that,
reason why is because the state law allows the petitioners tonight to force the question on the ballot. If it's not approved tonight by the council, they can go get signatures that equals 10% of the registered voters and force this question onto the ballot. If this question is changed tonight, then it makes it impossible for the petitioners to go get their 10% signatures on their original question, which is what they have to do.
Mr. Temple, is that true for an advisory question? I understand if there's a binding matter, but I'm not, I would be interested to know the clarification about an advisory question.
Yes, this is a state law, chapter 53, section 18A, which governs explicitly the placement of non-binding policy questions on ballots.
Okay, thank you.
And Counselor
ahead.
Baker, if you like, I can send you a law department memo from 1989 on this very issue.
Okay, I would be grateful if you would. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Temple, even if that's from 1989, you can email it, right? It doesn't have to be transmitted via 1989 technology.
I'll look into it.
Great, thank you. Okay, let me go to some of the hands that I have up here. Counselor Humphrey, followed by Wright. Counselor Humphrey?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing us over telex. Thanks everyone for participating tonight and coming to speak on this public hearing. Obviously, it is always appreciated and helpful to have feedback. I think many folks have noted that there have been a lot of changes, whether you agree with the changes or not. There have been a lot of changes to the various plans under consideration, and much of that has been due directly to public feedback. And certainly there's been a lot of public feedback and emailed feedback and so forth from my ward. So even if I didn't necessarily hear that many people from my ward tonight, and it seemed mostly very concentrated in other areas of the city, I've certainly taken feedback over email into consideration with regard to Waban and Upper Falls and Newton Highlands and so on in my capacity as the Ward 5 ward counselor. It was also interesting that a lot of the comments in support of the ballot question conceded the notion that there might be some flaws or problems or challenges with this question in its language. The one thing I didn't hear mentioned, which has been foremost in my mind, and I know I emailed the clerk and Counselor Baker and Counselor Krinsman and so forth as soon as this was filed, was that this to me is 4 unrelated ballot questions, and that has not been raised tonight, but I think that is an inescapable point here. Yes, it is framed as one, but in 4 parts, and the 4 parts are not part of the same thing. Many people would probably have different opinions on the different parts taken separately. I could easily see, someone having a negative opinion about question 1, but being in favor of question 3, or the opposite of that. Maybe they're against the point in question 4, but they're all for the point in question 3. So we have 4 unrelated questions. That is not typically how ballot questions are structured. At the state level, the court sometimes even steps in on state ballot questions to say, hey, this is too many questions in one thing. And as Counselor Crossley said, this question is framed, or these 4 questions are framed as a sort of context-free distillation of certain fragmentary points about the proposal. And it would be one thing, I guess, if you were to put the entire proposal on the ballot so people could look at all the interlocking parts and so forth, but to just put 4 kind of random points here that are taken from it, I think is a serious procedural problem and not particularly democratic, right? If you vote no, are you voting no on all 4 things? Are you voting no because of one of them? Are you, voting no because you have no idea what any of this is about? And many of the folks tonight made the point that they felt like there was not enough information about this process out there, or that they weren't well enough informed. I'm not sure that putting this on the ballot is going to make people more informed, especially if your point is that they don't have enough time to be engaged in this process. This is a very complex technical matter, as one of the commenters pointed out quite early on. We on the city council were elected to spend the time on these details, and I know, from going door to door extensively in the first campaign when I got elected, a lot of the younger folks, especially parents with school-age children, said, hey, we're going to vote for you because we don't have time to go to these meetings and to be up on all of the details of everything. And we're going to trust you based on your overall set of principles and objectives that you're going to vote how we want on this stuff, and that you'll listen to us when we have concerns if we do hear something that we have, a worry about. But there's a lot of technical details involved with this zoning stuff. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. I just mean it in terms of a bandwidth issue that a lot of people on both sides have mentioned. And the idea that somehow everyone is suddenly going to be informed and have the time to really dive into this just because it's put on the ballot does not really make a whole lot of sense to me. And even some of the people that were in support of putting this on the ballot expressed that this public hearing alone, they found out about at the last minute. And that doesn't speak very well to the notification just coming from the proponents alone, and this is a privately proposed ballot question not coming from the city. So it's not the case that there's going to be a lot of backup coming from the city if this does go to the ballot to say, hey, here's what the current latest proposal is and the rationale for it and how this fits in with the MBTA communities law from the state and everything. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And I'm not sure that I get the argument for saying that therefore we should put it on the ballot because everyone is confused and underinformed. And in fact, I see at these meetings, with a few exceptions, the same set of people, both for and against, coming to every single meeting. It's a pretty small number of people. And so I don't know that we can draw any conclusions one way or the other about any of this. But when it comes to these complicated technical matters that do require a huge amount of time and energy and bandwidth, that is why we have the city council to work on these things. And you can disagree with the conclusions. That's fine. I understand that. But that is sort of the way that the process is supposed to work. But from just a purely procedural standpoint here, I can't accept a 4-part ballot question going to the voters. That's just not how ballot questions are supposed to work. And you can't reasonably get any information even from a non-binding advisory question when it has 4 unrelated parts that people may have wildly disparate opinions on the 4 different parts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. Next, I have Councilor Wright, followed by Malaki. Councilor Wright.
Thank you, Chair Krinsman. A few things. Mr. Harrington did agree to change some of the wording, and as we're going along, what's being proposed is actually changing and it's being tweaked. And this is non-binding. I'd like to see something out there, and if we don't use what Mr. Harrington's questions, I'd like to be part of the team to put together something that would go onto the ballot as non-binding. One thing, and maybe the clerk's office can tell us definitively, typically for the elections, you get something in the mail and it tells you, who's running, and it tells you if there's ballot questions, and it gives you each side and information. So, and that goes out to every voter in the city. So one thing that hasn't been going out is information to every resident or even every voter in the city about the rezoning. And this is one way to get the information to the to the residents, weeks before the election, and they can spend some time getting more informed. Tonight, though, yes, we have many nights the same voices, the same people speaking up. But tonight, I was very surprised. There's a lot of new people that I do not know, new voices speaking up tonight. So I'd like to, if we don't accept this, I'd like to accept something that goes onto the ballot as a non-binding on the zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Malaki, followed by Greenberg. Councilor Malaki.
Thank you. Yeah, following up on what Councilor Wright said, I too was impressed by the number of people who are brand new that we never heard from before, because it is like this cohort of people who have been immersed in this. And I think the kind of sampling of people who just heard about this yesterday or this afternoon is kind of represents the tip of the iceberg of the general population of Newton who don't know what's going on. Now, my backdrop is the last thing I got in the my water bill insert. It's about composting. That's how hard it is to put something in, something that a large percentage of the residents of Newton get. Better than that would be something to everybody on the resident extract, the way we send out the census at the beginning of the year to check who the residents are. We have not done a good job about letting the general population know that this is even going on, despite, I've raised it when I've been able to attend ZAP meetings. I know Councilor Laredo has repeatedly talked about notification. We haven't notified renters and business tenants. We've only notified property owners in the actual literal parcels that were being rezoned, and now most recently these green cards that went to abutters and abutters of abutters. But what happens to village centers is of great concern and interest, not just to the people who are physically in or near them, but all of the population of Newton who want to use our village centers. So we've got to do a better job at notification, and I see non-binding ballot question as a way to help get the word out that this is actually going on, and then that gives people the awareness to look into it deeper. I don't have a problem with the fact that there are 4 different sort of bullet points on the non-binding question, because they represent kind of the core tenets or components that the planning department has all along been pushing, and that, you know, the city council seems ready to accept. And that's going to be a package deal when that's voted on. You know, the city council on the final vote isn't going to get to pick A and C, but not B and D. So it's a package. So it's a fair representation to get the sense of the community on how they feel about the package that is reasonably resembling what's under consideration by the city council. And it's non-binding. It doesn't have to be perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Maliki. I don't think it's true that we only notified landowners. By the way, I believe there were mailings, and I think Councilor Crossley went over that earlier. There were mailings that went to properties, to addresses.
That would be good.
Was good. Okay, Councilor Greenberg, followed by Lucas. Councilor Greenberg.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight and expressing their thoughts and concerns about this. I'm not on zoning and planning committee, but I've attended a majority of the meetings in an attempt to try to learn and try to understand zoning redesign. It's a complicated and technical proposal that has been constantly changing and evolving, much due to public input. That is why I'm concerned about this ballot question, because the 4 points on the ballot may not even reflect what the final proposal of ZAP will be. I don't know how having an imprecise ballot question will fully inform residents about the complexity and details of zoning redesign and the MBTA community law. So I will not support this ballot question as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lucas, followed by President Albright. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just start off by saying I am not on the Programs and Services Committee. So when they take a vote tonight, I will not participate in it. But when this does go to the full council, I do hope to cast my vote in favor of putting this non-binding question on the ballot. Quite frankly, I don't see what the harm is. It's non-binding. It's a way for residents, the people who live here, who pay taxes here, to give their feedback about this zoning proposal. That is basically what this is. It's non-binding. If the voters say yes, they say yes. If they say no, they say no. We have the option to pretty much ignore what they say with their vote because it's non-binding. Some of the questions that are before us, the 4 questions, those are probably going to be in the final proposal. That's just my hunch. That I don't see that changing. But you know, I don't see what the harm is. And going back to what Councilor Wright and Councilor Maliki said, and maybe another councilor, I don't remember who it was, that we did hear from some first-time speakers, people who don't usually attend the zoning and planning meetings or the land use meetings when we do have public hearings. Particularly, I want to give a shout out to Wendy Landon, Annie Wright, Jeffrey Kane, names that I haven't seen on this Zoom screen So now that we've been on air for about 3 years, we heard from them and they would like to see it on the November ballot. I think the community engagement for zoning redesign has been subpar. The mayor occasionally puts it in her newsletter, but not in every newsletter. The planning department did not send out a newsletter in January, February, and March of this year, I believe. You can double check that on the zoning redesign webpage. We still have not seen full renderings of the proposals, of a full build out analysis, something that I asked for and others have asked for. We haven't seen it. For every parcel of land that is being rezoned, I understand the planning department will not do this. I believe that is what they told us at one of the prior meetings. But again, a non-binding ballot question is a great way for the residents, for the property owners, the people who live here and pay taxes here, to give their feedback. The ballot question does not have to be perfect, but it needs to be in the ballpark, and quite frankly, it is. So I don't get to vote on this tonight. I will watch and listen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. President Albright, followed by Councilor Ryan. President Albright.
Thank you very much. And I have to apologize in advance if you hear a puppy barking or squeaking toys in the background. So we have a new puppy of almost 3 weeks now. First, I want to thank Peter Harrington for bringing so many people into the conversation. I think that has been a valuable service by itself. And I want to thank all the people who came and spoke tonight, whichever side of the issue that you were on. I'd like to take the opportunity, as Councillor Crossley did a little bit, to say some things about this whole process that were questioned during the testimony. I think there was some discussion about whether there were any goals or not, perhaps understanding the goals. And I think the council and the zoning and planning committee in particular had 2 or 3 major goals, and to create vibrant, viable, successful village centers where there's enough feet on the street to keep commercial mom and pop operations in good order and successful. That was one goal. Another goal was to create more housing near transit, to increase the supply of housing and decrease our dependence on cars. And I guess everyone has been listening to all the news lately about how Massachusetts is one of the states that's losing population. And the research indicates that it's because our housing is so unaffordable. So these are important goals for Newton. Another couple of folks talked about the fact that Brookline had done a study of its town before they came to their conclusions, whatever conclusions they're coming to. I just want to make sure that people know that we have done a similar process. The planning department and then the council looked at our village centers and studied them in their existing form and then in 2+ drafts of what they might become. So there was a significant study over the past couple of years of our village centers. One other person said, matter of fact, we should put these as binding referendums. I want to be clear, and Mr. Temple, you can confirm this, but if you might, that Chapter 48 says the city council is responsible for zoning, and we can't give that responsibility to anybody else. Am I correct about that?
That's correct. Zoning ordinance could not be passed by a initiative on a ballot.
Yeah. So you have us to work on the zoning for you, and it's our job to do it. And if you don't like us, there's remedies for that. And as Councillor Crossley mentioned, the public hearing will be open on June 26th. And it won't be closed on June 26th. It will stay open all summer. It will stay open into September. And on those 6,000 postcards that went out, there was links to the planning department with all those info sheets You'll have plenty of time over the summer to read them, study them, get together with study groups, ask us for help if you choose that, and then come back again in September and talk about what you've learned. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for people to be involved and have their say. There is a lot at stake because we began our work on village centers long before the MBTA Communities Act was passed, and then it was passed. And what's at stake is our ability to access state money. And some people say, well, there's not much of that. Well, we have learned that the $85 million bond issue that the state is willing to prepare for us to help us with our 3 Worcester Line stations along Washington Street, that is at stake. If we do not meet the MBTA Communities Act, we will not access that $85 million. And that would be a shame because we can't access federal money if we don't access that $85 million. So there is a lot at stake here. I've studied the ballot questions. I've read them over dozens, literally dozens of times. They do not reflect the issues at stake in the zoning ordinance. And I really hope that everyone here tonight who has been so involved goes to those info sheets, has a look at them, then goes to the code and reads that, because there's much more than height. There's much more than just parking. And I'm not sure I understood the last question on affordable housing. I didn't understand that one at all, what it was really getting at. And certainly if the MBTA Communities Act requires us to do by right what we have been doing by special permit. And if we don't do it by right, we can't comply with the MBTA Communities Act. So there's a lot at stake and those 4 questions don't really explain what's at stake. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put a motion on the table as we continue to discuss this tonight, that we move no action necessary on this ballot question. And I want everyone here to understand it's not because I don't want everybody here to participate. I do want everyone to understand what's going on and to participate. And I'm happy to spend as much time in meetings with folks as it takes to get people on, understanding. But we have a public hearing. People here should study the info sheets, the zoning code, and then come back and tell us what they think. And that's really a good opportunity for people to be involved. So I'll put that motion on the table as we continue to talk.
Thank you, Madam President. President has moved no action necessary. Now take discussion on that motion. Councillor Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we all made it over here on good time after the Newton South graduation. So I was shocked. But anyway, I sit on this committee and the Zoning and Planning Committee. And we've done, since I came on the council almost 4 years ago, I've been on that committee and it was thrown right in the mix. And it's an awful lot of work and a lot of learning the curve and figuring out what's going on and then trying to do what is best for the city and for my ward. And, it was good to see some people tonight that maybe other councils haven't seen, but that from Ward 8 that I've worked with on the 40B project we have on Boylston Street. And so they're involved in certain ways. But what I'd like to say, and I'm not going to say everything I was going to say because President Albright just about said it all, is that all the people that were here tonight, I really hope they come June 26th and tell everybody else to come June 26th. And also that people seem to be saying a lot, they don't know what's going on. But one way to know what's going on, I've said this before, other councilors have said it before, is every Friday we have a packet, and it's the Friday docket, And it's not just for the city councilors, it's for the whole city. And you could see what the items are that are coming before the zoning and planning committee next week. And it's a lot about what we've talked about tonight. And you can stay on top of it, or you can go back and watch the feeds on New TV, or you can be involved, and you can be involved, not as much as a lot of people are, but enough that you can see what's going on and be educated on the subjects. And this zoning and planning committee is doing a lot of really hard work on this. And I can't support this this ballot initiative tonight. It's not that I support ballot initiatives. I've worked on a lot of them in the state, and non-binding ballot initiatives too, which I'm not that keen on, but I'd rather have them be binding. But in this case, I just don't like the format. I don't like the way it's written. I don't like the last part of it. And I'm one of the people that screams the loudest about being able to make sure that we have affordable units and small units. And I'm continually told that I can't regulate size of units, which will make units less expensive and be near transit. So, that's what I want, but I still don't like the way that the last part of the ballot initiative, that question about people with the means that are going into units that should be for other people. And if that's happening, I don't like it, but what we need to do is make sure that we have units that are below an AMI that people can afford, that our DPW workers can afford, that we can get people back in the city that work in this city. So it's not about that. It's just I don't like the way it's written. And I'd rather have people come to June 26th and through the summer and back in the fall for the other public hearing. We're leaving open before we start talking about ballot questions. And I just think it also confuses everybody a little more. But I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Ryan. Councilor Crossley, I have your hand up, but can I go to folks who haven't spoken yet, or do you want to just clarify something?
Please do.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Councilor Kelly, followed by Oliver. Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm very glad that I am given the chance to speak. I'm not on this committee on programs and services, and I'm not on zoning and planning either, though I have been trying to follow this, as people have said, very complicated zoning process. And even though I am a counselor and following it, it is still confusing. And I'm glad I went after Councilor Ryan, because she pointed out to everyone on this meeting that one way to be able to feel like you do know what's going on, because it can be an onerous task, is that Friday packet. You can just click on it Friday evenings, or I do it late Friday afternoon and see what's going on, because sometimes I've heard from many people that the city website is difficult to navigate and you don't really know where to go for information, but that I appreciate very much that she pointed that out to everyone. I'm also glad that I get to be one of the people to give the Programs and Services Committee some input, because I'm not voting on it tonight. Though I think close to 50 people, 50 residents, voters have spoken on this tonight, which is a lot for a public hearing. The participation here, as others have said, on both sides of the issue, and people in the middle just with questions and comments, has been really impressive to me. If nothing, then the interest that was shown tonight is developed, and people now are going to stay following this more and being able to share with their friends and neighbors how to stay involved. That will be an accomplishment in and of itself. To the point before you, I would I would like to be aligned. I am aligned with Councillor Greenberg's comments, very much so. I very much also appreciate President Albright's motion to NAN this. I would do that if I were on the committee too. I think that giving it more time, I think for everybody to be aware and to have like the patience to know that starting June 26th, you can all still stay involved, that's the beginning of the public hearing process. I'm not convinced that the wording of this advisory ballot question, as a few other councilors have raised, will help inform the public. I think the fact that 4 pieces of it have been extracted and perhaps simplified and partial bothers me, as a couple of other councilors have mentioned too. So if I were you tonight, I would not vote in favor of putting this on the ballot, but I hope you will vote in favor of the motion that President Albright made. And I hope we'll all have this conversation many more times as the situation unfolds, and to have patience for the presentation that I think we will be getting on the 26th. So again, thank you very much for letting me have a word, even though I'm not on your committee. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Councilor Kelly. Councilor Oliver, followed by Baker. Councilor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Chair Krinsman. And I'd like to also point out before the night goes too much longer without someone else agreeing what a fantastic job you're doing this evening and every evening and chairing these meetings. I'm also not a member of this committee. And I think that I echo a lot of the sentiment I've heard tonight in terms of the participation tonight from a lot of residents outside of what I'll call kind of the usual suspects, regardless of which side of the issue we were hearing from. There was also one element tonight that we heard from a few different folks, if I recall correctly, the lack of press, if you will, the lack of a newspaper, the lack of information, with that is, theoretically at least free of editorial sway, is not entirely true. We do have Fig City News. We do have councilor newsletters. Maybe there's some editorial involved in some of those, but I think that what we should be taking away tonight as a positive, if nothing else, is when people, residents, hear about what is going on, their ears pick up. And I think that every single one of the 24 counselors here bears a responsibility to not only be listening, but to be talking about what's going on, and doing our best to see it from or through other people's eyes. We heard a few residents talking about trust or the lack thereof. Not that I want to dwell on that, but I get it. I think that, as the proposal, right, the rezoning proposals change and more from version 1 to version 2, and, what the VCODs are going to look like and how they're going to vary by village. As all of that changes, it's very hard to keep on top of everything as a city councilor who's not on ZAP. Keeping up with that, it's just a couple of extra hours a week, but it's worth it. This is the single most important thing, I think, in front of us. I believe it dwarfs the overrides. This will affect every property in the city, directly and or indirectly. I urge this group that is voting tonight, of which I am not one, to think long and hard about, if you are going to cast a vote to support an NAN, consider how it is we're going to individually and collectively continue to pull people in to engage in this process. Personally, I hope that this does come to the full council. I would love the opportunity to support the idea of getting this or something close to it on the ballot. I do think it's important that we get and utilize every measure possible. Putting messages inside water bills, for example, that makes sense. I'm going to stop because I feel like I'm about to start to ramble and repeat myself, but I appreciate it. Thanks everyone who showed up tonight. We heard you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Oliver, and thank you for the kind words. You know, throughout the night, people have, applauded or given thumbs up or anything, and I noticed that there was a noticeable absence of that when you said the kind words about me, but I'm not offended, so fear not. Councilor Baker.
Well, I have to just cheer on the chair so he doesn't feel that no one applauds him. So I appreciate again all the people who have come tonight. But one of the challenges this poses, and I hope you will bear with me a minute because I'm a member of both zoning and planning and the Programs and Services Committee. I am now completing my 40th year on this city council. So I think I'm the senior member present in both age and service. This is a very big change for the city. Now, there are some positives behind it, and the president and Chair Crosley has outlined those. There are some challenges involved in it that are going to have to be sorted out by the members of the committee at first, and then the council as a whole. I think part of the rationale for the ballot question is to inform a much even larger constituency and engage them than even have appeared tonight in response to the postcards in some ways. Because 32,000 people in the city will be affected by this. Part of the changes that people may not be aware of in part of the package is that in order to do what is intended for making village centers more housing provide more housing opportunity, and you hope commercial activity as a result in the village centers, we're moving from the largely special permit by the city council model to what is called as of right, meaning that people can go and get a building permit and put something up without going through the city council process, which has been a vehicle where we've worked and carefully gotten a number of major projects into shape where people feel at least comfortable with them and how they've turned out. That's a process change. Taking parking away in terms of a requirement in the village centers is designed to make it less costly to build, but it also leaves to the private sector to put up the parking that is needed, as opposed to what parking may be necessary in order to service the units that are there, or indeed the commercial activity that's going to be there nearby. Building taller is certainly going to make it possible to do some elevator-based housing, which is desirable, but it also changes the character of the way village centers have appeared to us all now for a long time. And we've added on to it the MBTA Communities Act, which says that the city has to provide as of right family-oriented, at least housing of larger numbers of units, in other words, bedrooms. And the target is 25% of the existing housing stock. Now that, as we've talked in committee, is grounded on a foundation that the statute says that there is a district of reasonable size that can be required as part of this state law. But as all of us know, that is a number that has been produced by the state housing agency. And some people have contested whether there's a foundation for such a change, but that is what is there. So the net effect is that we're talking about between the community, the MBTA Communities Act and the initiatives that the council has already been undertaking, potential increase of somewhere in the order of 50% of the as of right opportunity for construction in the city, even though it's on a small percentage, as Councilor Crosley quite properly pointed out, of the city itself. That has impacts on our ability to provide services. We obviously have to look at the revenue that's generated by those, as well as the opportunities. All of these things are going to be discussed in the committee, and they have been discussed and will be continued to be discussed as we go forward. one of the reasons that I'm somewhat attracted by this item, even though if I had to phrase it, I might phrase it slightly differently, is it does get the whole community involved. I do think, unless Mr. Temple corrects me to the contrary, that a zoning ordinance can itself be the subject of a referendum. One of the concerns that I've heard expressed is that this is something that may end up before the voters one way or another. There is an advantage perhaps in having an advisory question proceed rather than follow what the council may do. And indeed, the council's own actions are going to be complex enough because some pieces may have to be voted separately, not as a package, notwithstanding the way the ordinance is being put together. So I think that this is, as many people have already commented, a very complicated matter, but marks a major shift in the way that the city's development opportunities would be framed in specific areas with impacts that can, I think, be fairly said over time, even though not everything will happen instantly, will change the character of the city in a way that we have not seen before. Now, that may be a desirable outcome, and we may want to go there in regardless of the prod from the state. But I think that it requires at least an awareness in the city as a whole that this is a major shift and should be thought through. So that's my reason for being more receptive to the idea of this advisory question than I would be normally, because I do think this is such an important issue. And there are good arguments on both sides, and I don't prejudge where I'm actually going to come out when we come to the end of this process. But I do think that the public interest requires the public to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Crossley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I want to talk about the questions that are before you a little bit more. I think I see how this is going, but the matter of the people wanting to be heard is a serious matter. But I don't think it's appropriate to put it forward in this way with these questions. I do want to respond first, though, to a couple of comments that Councilor Baker mentioned. I'm not going to go into all of the particulars or even any of the particulars of the zoning proposal itself, which everyone, I hope, will be able to take the time to understand over the next weeks. A lot of people, including Councilor Baker, have said what a big change this represents to the city. Change, it seems to me, is upon us. Change in our community, in our state, in our country is, we're at a moment in time where change is happening very quickly on many fronts. And it may be something that is, undermining our ability to work to solve some of the problems that we have collaboratively, perhaps. But before there was zoning, many of the buildings that got built in our village centers in the city of Newton were 3 and 4 stories, which high towers and so forth, and densely packed in our village centers. But a lot of the landscape was left open. Then we had some zoning put down, and that represented a huge change at that point in time. It was sold to folks based on wanting to separate uses, incompatible uses, like the gas station you don't want next to your house. But what it in fact did is it laid out a map of the entire city and told people what they could build where, right? The next big change was 35 years later, 1953, when the zoning changed again, and it was based upon a feeling by many, since now we had automobiles, that we could develop more of the city. And so we rapidly, the city of Newton, as the we, rapidly spread out across our boundaries and put houses on pretty good sized lots throughout the city. Our zoning hasn't substantially changed since then, although there was some change in 1987 in our commercial districts. What we're trying to do with this zoning is to get back to some of the things that people say they love and want. That activity in the village centers. The fact that you can walk out and be part of a community and meet people that you know, meet people that you don't know, gather and so forth. And we have some serious barriers to overcome. The traffic that has built up over all this time. But we're not proposing to add, you know, a lot more traffic. The whole idea of putting housing, clustering it in and around the business centers is so that people can walk to a lot of the things that they want to do. So I really do hope that folks will dig in and see what and why we have these different layers built into the proposal to try to address real problems and real issues and what a lot of people say they want, but then maybe get nervous about, you know, what it is we need to do in order to achieve those things today. The questions themselves, as I said earlier, and many people said, pulling these particular questions out as questions that pretend to be representative of the zoning is inaccurate. But two of the questions themselves are also inaccurate. And I want to make sure everybody understands why. It's in the planning department report that accompanied this docket item tonight. Many people have said, please go to the Friday packet and you can see these reports. You can also see the clerk's reports of every meeting. So you can go back and read the reports of the Zoning and Planning Committee meeting if you want to see where we've been and where we're going. But the two inaccurate questions are very troubling because you folks are saying, we want this thing on the ballot to help inform people, but whereas in fact, it's going to misinform people. Question number 2 conflates two metrics it says that should we allow developments to be built without a special permit on lots that are less than 30,000 square feet, and that's different from the current law, which says we get special permits when buildings are on lots of more than 10,000 square feet. That's not true. The special permit threshold today is about the size of the building. When a building is 20,000 square foot or more, it goes automatically to the special permit process. The proposal is changing that to lot size. And there are lots of other changes too, but the question, what I'm trying to convey is it's not an accurate question. And so it's just going to confuse people. And it makes it sound like we're doing something more dramatic than we're doing. The fourth question, which people have mentioned as confusing, is also inaccurate because it says we should, should we allow developers to build fewer affordable housing units and basically allow not require as deep a subsidy as we currently do. That question is inaccurate because it's not up to date. There's nothing changing. Our existing inclusionary ordinance, which requires that developers build a certain percentage of affordable housing at an average income level, a certain income level, is remaining the same for all projects across Newton over 6 units, and it will also apply to this Village Center Overlay District. So it is true we have to show that we can do it, but we know that we can because we have and we do. So these are just, people have talked about tweaking the questions. The law department has made clear that council is not allowed to touch the wording in the questions. And so if these questions were to be put forward, they would misinform the public. So if folks want to have a non-binding advisory question on the ballot, it should be, as the law department said, it needs to be redone. But I really hope folks will wait until they see the product and come to the presentation. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the proposed zoning is dramatic. And it is a big change to the village center. I agree there should be some changes, and adding additional housing in the village center would be great. The issue here, what we're talking tonight is, is this going, as non-binding? And what I said earlier is it isn't quite correct what in other counselors have brought up, what it's asking the questions. And what's being proposed is, I think, going to get tweaked some more. So if we don't put this up as a non-binding, I would like us counselors to put something up there and have something correct and have a non-binding question, because it sounds like that's something we can do. Is that correct?
That's correct. A counselor could docket an item to put a question on the ballot.
Okay. Okay. Because I think, and again, information then would hopefully do go out to the voters as part of the voting package with this information, and get out there to the residents, which is not happening now. Talking to people, there's a lot of people that I have spoken to who have no idea what's going on at all. There are a few that are very well informed, but that's the rare exception. And what Councillor Crossley said is, we do need to get approval, and we have not had the approval yet to use our inclusionary zoning. So right now, what's out there is, I think, what they did put in this question. And we're expecting to get approval, but we have not received it. And I don't think anyone has received the approval for inclusionary zoning. And I'm cautious about it. I don't think we can just say, yeah, we're going to get it. That's something else I worry about. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Baker?
So I just want to respond a little bit to Councilor Crossley to indicate that I think that some of what she's pointing out is important. That the details may not be exactly right, and that does have some concern to me, because I think that even the ballot question, if we're going to endorse it, ought to be as accurate as we can, and we apparently have no control over that. But I do think it's important for people to understand that the attempt, as I understand it, was to clarify that the threshold for scale of what properties could be subject to a special permit are going to be significantly greater than currently is the practice. Special permit is, for the public who are not part of this conversation on a regular basis, means that you don't automatically get to do something. You have to persuade at least a majority if it's a special kind of housing, or 2/3 of the council if it's not, to say yes to it. And that's an important, in my judgment, safeguard from our process now. So at this point, I think I'm going to abstain on the vote, because I have some concerns about the accuracy of what is proposed. But I just want to indicate that I think that this is an issue that's going to get to the voters one way or another. And I think it may be valuable, along the lines of what Councilor Wright indicated, to try and make sure that the information is at least gives the full picture of what we're being asked to do, so that people really understand, and then we have the benefit of their advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Wright, your hand is still up, but I sense that that's from, okay. All right, President Albright has moved NAN. Councilor Danberg. Councilor Danberg, unmute, please.
Unmute. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair, and also thank you for all the work that you've done and the wonderful job that you've done tonight. And I want to thank everybody who's taken the time to come here and speak tonight. In every with every point of view. I think every point of view is important, and we have learned a lot. I've certainly learned a lot from what I've heard tonight. We've seen a lot of new faces, and also, Mr. Harrington, thank you very much for the time and passion that you've put not only into this issue, but into the many issues over the many years that you've been involved with this city, and we appreciate it. I'm very glad to hear the willingness of everyone to think about this, to listen, and to want to be better informed. And I would reiterate the comments about the mayor's newsletter. I believe I heard, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that the mayor now has something like 32,000 emails that she sends out with her newsletter. It's very widely spread, and she will have the opportunity and has had the opportunity to let us know about all of the important issues that are facing the city. This is a very important issue. I would say that I do sit on the Zoning and Planning Committee, and I've been on it for a number of years now. And this initiative is going to shape how the city not only looks but functions. What it will look like over time, over many decades. And that's why it's so important that everyone understand and weigh in on this. We have not made any appreciable changes to the zoning since 1987. And as Councillor Crossley said, the last tweak was in the 1950s when after the Depression and after the war, and when the automobile was now proliferating, we were an affluent enough community to have taken down a lot of the old buildings that people thought would never be used the way they were used in the 19th century, which was shops on the bottom and housing on the top, and the butcher lived over the butcher shop and the baker lived over the baker shop. And people thought that with the automobile coming, nobody would ever want to do that again if they could take their car, live farther away, have a yard, and drive into our villages and do their shopping. And so when these buildings were taken down, they were replaced with buildings that reflected that. And that's what we largely have now in many of our villages. We replace these buildings with largely one story. And now we're looking at perhaps wanting a bit more European feel to our villages, where a couple of people commented that they wanted to see more people on the sidewalks, eyes on the sidewalk, people that could just stroll out of their units in the village that had elevators, and so that seniors and older people would, many of whom want to downsize and live where they can do all of their shopping and socializing in one place, would be able to live, and they cannot now because A, there's no place for them to live, and B, some of the places that are there are difficult because they do not have elevators. And we need to accommodate people with disabilities and people, older people and people who have mobility issues also, because a lot of the retirees are the ones who would probably want to live close to the villages. This ballot question and ballot questions in general give a lot of good information. And they give information that the city councils and the legislators can act on accordingly. I am certainly not anti-ballot questions. I have worked on ballot questions in the past myself. I think that this particular ballot question needs to be reworded, and I agree with Councillor Crossley in that there are a couple of items in it that are not necessarily misinformative, but certainly misleading. She pointed out two of them, and I agree with her assessment of those two. So I think that if anything, we would certainly need to reword this and look at how it would better convey the accuracy of what this what the zoning question is trying to accomplish. We are beginning hearings on June 26th. They will go through the summer as President Albright has said. She will keep the hearings open, and we will pick it up again in the fall and begin discussions in the fall. So I think I will leave it here and say that I'm, although I do not sit on the Programs and Services Committee, if and when this comes to the City Council, I would not likely support this initiative and would encourage no action necessary on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Danberg. I want to quickly acknowledge that Councilor Chris Markowitz has joined us. He joined us earlier. I failed to notice or give him credit for being here earlier. So I apologize, Councilor Markowitz, but he is here. He is listening. He does care. Seeing no other hands, I'll give my 2 cents. Again, we have a motion from President Albright to NAN, or no action necessary, this item. What I heard tonight, a lot of different points, but one of the overwhelming sentiments was that individuals want to have input. People want the ability to provide public input on the zoning reform that is pending before the City Council. I think this ballot question with a binary choice of yes or no on 4 different questions is not a great way for the public to provide input. I think, like I said, the petition asks via ballot question 4 parts, which are confusing, and a bigger problem is that they don't accurately reflect components of the zoning reform that have actually been finalized as a proposal. So email is an excellent way to provide input. Having a conversation with city councilors is an excellent way. We're always having coffee with people. We're having phone calls. Those are great ways. And as several people have said, the zoning and planning public hearing that will begin on June 26th is another excellent way to have input. If down the road there is a concern that the City Council has actually finalized a zoning change that is still objectionable, I think Councilor Baker alluded earlier to the process under our charter to challenge that via the referendum process. So I heard a number of people say that they haven't had a lot of information about this, that they've just learned about tonight's hearing, for example, last night or after the hearing began. The good news is you found out. And the good news is that it's not too late to provide public input on the process as it moves forward. Please stay involved, keep communicating with us, keep communicating with your neighbors, friends and neighbors, get more people involved. We definitely like public input. Having said that, I will conclude. I see no other hands. I'm going to call for a vote of the committee. Again, the motion is to NAN the item. So a yay vote is to support no action necessary. We're going to do this by hands. So under the reactions tab, the virtual hand, if you please. All those in favor of President Albright's motion to NAN, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you. Members of the committee who are opposed to the motion to NAN. All right, and abstentions.
That's me. I don't know how to make this work.
No problem. So noted. So Councilor Baker and Councilor Wright abstained, and we have 1 absent. So that is 5-0 to 2 for NAN. That concludes the business of the committee tonight. Again, thank you to everyone who came out. I know you pay us the big bucks to do this stuff. You don't get paid to do it. So thank you for coming out and spending your night with us. We do appreciate it. And we will see you at some point in the future. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.